The fishman strikes very fast with his sword, which greatly surprised the clone that was attacked. He blocks this blow with his hand, but the metal plate did not hold up and split into many parts, which greatly surprised Sanwoo. The monster strikes again with his hand and throws the clone very hard. The clone coughs up blood and thinks that this monster has suddenly become stronger. The fishman lands a few more punches and throws both clones in different directions. Sanwoo looks at the monster and wonders if it's the sword. It reacts to blood. It also means that the fishman is quite badly injured. Perhaps this is a temporary gain. A badly wounded clone ran up to the monster and stabs it with a knife, which greatly surprised the monster. The monster strikes back with its sword, but the clone jumps out of the way just in time. The monster ran up to him very quickly and pierced him with its sword. Sanwoo, like this clone, felt very much pain after being hit. The clone forcefully grabbed the monster's sword arm. He clutches the knife in his hand and says that he knew it wouldn't end well. However, if blood is to be spilled, he swings the knife in his hand and says loudly that if he does, the blood will flow out of him even more. He strikes many times with a knife on the monster's body and does not let go of his hand. The fisherman swings his free-clawed hand and makes a very loud sound. The clone deflects this blow and continues to stab. He continues to stab non-stop despite his severe wounds. The monster is very angry and looks at its opponent and clenches its teeth. The fishman swings his leg and is about to attack his opponent. The monster was able to pull the sword out of the clone's body and landed a very strong kick on its body. This attack knocked the clone back a lot, but he was able to hold out after the incident. The monster runs towards him and is about to deliver a very strong blow with a burning sword. The second clone managed to get between them and block the blow with the metal plates on his hands. After that, both clones ran towards that monster with knives in their hands. The two of them quickly run towards the monster that is looking at them from both sides. They run next to the monster and deal two strong blows. Because of these blows, the monster felt a lot of pain and blood flowed out of its mouth. From these wounds on its body, blood begins to flow and the monster makes soft noises. Due to all these injuries and the massive damage, the monster lost all its strength and fell to its knees. The monster slowly falls to the ground head first with a loud sound. The clone is very tired from this fight and is breathing heavily. Sanwoo looks at it and thinks it's over. One of the clones fell to the ground and the other one sat down next to him and they think they can't even take a step anymore. The clone who is lying on the ground examines his gun and thinks that the bullets are out, so the hunt is over for today. He gets up, looks away, and thinks he feels like he's going to die. You need to inform the agent about this. He notices that there was no corpse where the monster's body was, but there are bloody footprints that go towards the forest. The clone was very surprised when he noticed the absence of the fisherman's corpse. He wonders if it isn't dead. He turns around, calls out to number 2, and says he should follow the tracks. He looks where the tracks lead and thinks that there is a portal in that direction. At the same time, a man in a military uniform apologizes and says that they received a report about the presence of a D-class monster in the territory for hunting. So the entrance for hunters is closed. The hunter is surprised by this and asks, "Does this mean they can't enter?" The man says that the hunters from the association will be arriving soon, so they will report all the changes later. The hunter is upset about this and says that it took him so long to build a team. Jinmo looks at these people and thinks that Sanwoo should hurry up. A loud discussion between the people next to him caught his attention. The soldier took up his weapon, looks through the portal, and says that he should hurry up and gather his strength. He also has to inform the boss. Another soldier agrees with him and leaves. Another soldier approached him, and both of them aimed at the fisherman who was running towards this portal. The monster makes very loud noises and runs quickly, swinging its sword. The military man says loudly that they should open fire. They must not allow this monster to approach the portal. The monster does not pay attention to all their shots and continues to run towards them with a burning sword. The monster breaks through to the portal and strikes at one of the soldiers who shot. Number 2 has caught up with this monster, looks at the monster and swings his hand. He holds his knife in his hand by the blade and with a very quick movement of his hand throws this knife. He finishes the throw and his knife flies towards the monster that is trying to get into the portal. This knife hit the monster's head, but it couldn't penetrate the monster's skull and bounced off inside the building. Sanwoo jumps away from one of the soldiers and grabs the knife that bounced off the monster's head. He looks at this monster with a very serious expression on his face and thinks that he needs to hit with all his strength. He strikes a very strong blow to the head and plunges a knife into the head of this monster. The monster that broke through the portal spread its arms wide and made very loud noises, and blood flowed from its wound. Sangwoo continues to press down on the knife and presses it into the monster's head. What he is doing has greatly surprised the military, who have seen what he is doing. The monster falls to the ground with it after this hit. The clone who threw this knife fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He points his finger up and says it was cool. At the same time, the man calls on the phone, agrees, and says that they have arrived at the right place. He says with a serious expression that they will send him a detailed report after the investigation. He sees a crowd of people gathered around something and wonders what is going on there. He notices that this crowd of people has gathered around the body of the slain monster. This man who just arrived at this place is wondering, is this a fisherman? A military man came up to him and asked if he was from the association. The man agrees and asks what happened here. The military says that the information that a D-class monster appeared here turned out to be true, but it was already dealt with by a hunter who entered the territory before the portal closed. The man says that, however, this is F-class hunting territory. There was a D-class hunter team here. The military refuses and says that the D-class hunter, or team of hunters, is not responsible for the victory. The man is confused when he hears this and asks what does he mean. The soldier points to the side and says that they are still investigating, but as far as they know, that F-class hunter over there killed the monster along with his clones. The man looks at him with a serious expression and wonders if an F-class hunter with clones was able to defeat a D-class monster. He examines the monster's body and thinks that all the attacks were inflicted on one wound. It was probably a strategy for dealing damage without special weapons. He looks at Sangwoo, who is covered in blood, and wonders if it's possible to shoot a moving monster and hit it accurately. The man looks at him with a serious expression and doesn't say anything. He starts walking and says that they will check if there are any other D-class monsters left behind the portal. They should finish their investigation in the meantime. The military agrees with him. A man approaches the portal and wonders what to tell the association. Maybe he should say that he was the one who dealt with the monster. The system notifies that the sprint skill has been created. The active sprint skill of the first level gives an additional boost while running. The shooting skill has been created, a first level passive shooting skill that gives extra strength points when using weapons. The regeneration stat is unlocked and totals for 101 points. The defeat skill has been created. Active skill defeat of the first level applies all the force for one attack after activation. Strength increased, stamina increased, stamina increased, strength increased. Sanwoo wipes his face with a handkerchief and thinks that so many skills have been unlocked this time. He didn't even notice right away because he was busy hunting. Did number 1 and number 2 survive because of the regeneration stat? Junmo turns around and asks, "How are the clones feeling?" Sunwoo says that they are injured, but it takes time for his skill to summon them again. It seems that if it allows them to recover on their own, it will increase the regeneration stat. Junmo says that in any case, he did a great job and even managed to defeat a D-class monster. Sangwoo laughs and says that he's a little ashamed to say that after asking to be trusted, but it was dangerous. Junmo says he's not really joking. He seems to be able to hunt E-class monsters without any problems. Sangwoo thinks about it and says it seems like it's possible since he's a fast learner. He remembers something and says that the monster had a short sword. He walks past a crowd of people and says that this monster had a unique short sword that absorbed blood. Junmo is surprised by this and asks, "Did he say a sword that absorbed blood?" Sunwoo reaches for the sword that is lying on the ground next to the monster, agrees, and says that it was completely insane when his eyes turned red. He already thought he was going to die. Junmo stopped him and says he has to stop. It seems like he'd better ask the clone to pick it up. It might be a cursed item. Sangwoo turns to him and asks, so he can't take advantage of this. Junmo says that cursed items are quite rare. Junmo says that cursed items are quite rare, so it can be very expensive depending on the effects. Sunwoo was very happy when he hears it and says he likes it. He stands up and says he will let the clone take it for now. Will the collection team take everything else? Junmo agrees with this and says that he can expect a decent compensation since it's a D-class monster. Sangwoo says that he feels like it's over for today. If he stayed too long, he might get caught in a stampede of reporters. He searches for something in his pocket and asks, then, is this item also expensive? It fell out of the fishman's mind. He shows the crystal and Yonlo looks at what it shows. He was very surprised when he realized what it was. He is staring intently at this red-colored crystal that he is holding. He looks surprised and thinks that this is a low-level gem, a priceless item. He's upset and thinks it's very hard for him to tell him the truth. Sangwoo points at the crystal with a very happy expression and asks, "It's rare and expensive, isn't it?" Junmo apologizes and says it's a cheap item. It improves performance, but it can't be applied to humans. Plus, there are a number of serious side effects, so it's very cheap. Sunwoo was very upset about what he heard. Junmo says that, but other items will be quite expensive, so he shouldn't be upset. Sangwoo continues to cry, but still thanks him for it. He looks down and says that then, he should take care of the collected items. He is grateful to him. Junmo says it's mutual. Sometime later, when he returned to his home and opened the front door, Sunwoo comes in with some very injured clones and says it's been a busy day. First, he wants to summon number 3 again, and they can rest for now. The clones heard this and immediately fell on the bed. Sunwoo uses her skill, releases energy through her arm, and creates her clone. Immediately after, his third clone appears in front of him. He takes out his clothes and tells number 3 that they haven't seen each other for a long time. He should take his uniform and go study. After that, Sangwoo takes off his soiled clothes to put on something else. He changed his clothes, sat down on Thefler in front of the box, and is about to say something. He opens the box that contains the sword from the monster, and he puts down the crystal that he also got from the monster. He says that now he can take care of the items he received. He looks at the screen of his phone and says it means it's a strengthening stone. The hunter's website says it's a low-level power-up stone. A power crystal that requires mana to activate increases strength by 0.5 points, can't be used on a human. If you use the crystal too much, the target will turn into a monster. Sunwoo looks at the screen of his phone and says, which means you can't use the stone on a human, but maybe it will work on the summoned creature, but it will turn it into a monster. He thinks a constant 0.5 point increase in strength sounds tempting, but he's worried about the side effect. Normally, Theklone's wounds and other sufferings are not transmitted to him. However, what if turning into a monster had an effect on him? He imagines that he has become a monster, came to the agent and waves his hand, which really scared him. Junmo is very scared of Fim, immediately shoots his gun, and says that he should die. Sangwoo is worried that this might happen, and thinks that he won't use it just yet. He looks into the box with the sword, and says that next he wants to check it out. He remembers that Junmo had previously told him that he thought it would be better to ask the clone to bring it up. It might be a cursed item. Sangwoo says that they put it in a box just in case, so that there would be no problems during transportation. It's not a bad idea to sell it if the item is expensive, but why not take advantage of it before selling it? He calls out to number 2 and says he should bring it up. The clone who is resting on the bed goes to him and agrees. The clone has moved closer to him and is reaching for this sword that is in the box. He raises this sword over his head with a very sharp movement of his hand. And this surprised Sangwoo. They sit on the floor for a while and wait for something to happen. He asks, "Is that really the end of it?" The clone says he hears a voice. Sunwoo asks, "Did he say the voice?" The system notifies that he has activated a familiar skill. He contacts the clone and immediately hears a very loud voice saying that he should kill and give him blood. He asks him to hurry up and do it as soon as possible. Sangwoo immediately deactivated the familiar skill and clutched his ear due to hearing that voice. He says it was very loud. He looks at the clone and thinks that it doesn't seem to affect him, except that the voice is very noisy. Would it affect him if he took the sword directly? That must be why that fishman went crazy. Sangwoo says they can use it for a while. The clone agrees with him. His attention is drawn to the system window, which says that his regeneration is increased. Sunwoo looks at the clones that are lying down and resting and thinks that it must be that resting helps them regenerate faster. He sat down on the floor and says that after all, starting tomorrow, he will have to send them to hunt, and they are still in this state. They will all be meditating today. They must unlock the mana breath. They should meditate even when he is not around. The clones continue to lie and agree with him. Sunwoo has sat down in a meditation position, and the system notifies that he has activated meditation position, He says he has to go to school tomorrow. After a while, a lot of different people were walking in the park near the university. Sangwoo walks down the university corridor with a smile and thinks that the holiday shave flown by very quickly. The system window appears in front of him, and he thinks, is this because he was busy improving the characteristics? Its characteristics are written in the system window. Strength improved to 1,456 points, reflexes 1,231 points, health 1,045 points. Stamina is a 913 points. Mana is a 356 points. Shootings othering 53 points. Regenerations on for war. This is not surprising, because he does not give clones a single second of rest. He burst into tears and thinks that in any case, he didn't know he was so lonely. No one even tries to pretend to know him. Sangwoo opens the door to the office he needs and looks inside. He is surprised when he sees Jendo, and he notices him too. He says that he didn't know that he would be in the same class as him. Sunwoo asks, so is he also in this class? He sits down. I signed up for this course because I heard that the teacher is generous with his grades. Sangwoo says that he didn't know what he cared about. Jendo asks, does he still work out regularly at the gym? Sangwoo says that of course it's true, he's not the same as him. The girl who noticed this turned to the other girl and asked who it was. Another girl is surprised by this and asks, wasn't he overweight? Other girls say that she almost didn't recognize him. Maybe she'd suggest that he go on a blind date. Jendo leans over to him, chuckles, and says that he's become quite popular. Sangwoo says that's why no one greeted him. He points to himself and asks, has he really changed that much? Jendo asks, is he joking now? Did he see his parents? He's pretty sure even they wouldn't recognize him. Sunwoo asks, is he serious? He was just planning to go home for a little while. Jendo says that when he met him on the street, he didn't recognize him either. They can go out for a drink after couples, and they can invite others along. Sangwoo quietly says that he already has plans. Jendo is very surprised by what he said and asks if he can explain himself. Sangwoo is embarrassed by this and says that he already promised, so he can't go with him. Jendo says very loudly that he is a dirty traitor. How could he do this to him? Is he going out with a girl? He definitely had a girlfriend. Sangwoo is very embarrassed about this and says that it's not like that at all. He needs to calm down. He's really sorry. He asks that he explain to the others as well. Jendo points to the two guys who were sitting next to them and says very loudly that there is no need to do this because they have already heard everything. Sangwoo is surprised when he sees them with surprised expressions and asks, are Chongwoo and Jang Seong also here? Jendo says very loudly, everyone will remember that. Sangwoo says he should be quieter since the professor is here. Sometime later, at the International Mao Hunter Association, there were a lot of people sitting at computers and looking at screens. A man with glasses tells a man who is looking out of the window that the Oracle has predicted a catastrophe. Mao's chairman, Michael Harris, asks what is the essence of this prediction. The man with glasses says that creating a portal and invading hundreds of monsters. Michael Harris turns to him and asks if the location of the portal and the date of the invasion are already known. The man says that they know that the highest rank of those monsters will be equal to a class. There is also a high probability that the portal will open within a few days. He looks at the document in his hand and says that the estimated location is South Korea. Park 1T adjusts his tie and wonders what's going on. Why are there so many people here? A girl with cat ears runs towards him and calls him very loudly. She bumps into 1T, who wasn't expecting this, with a happy expression on her face. She's embarrassed because he has fallen to the floor and is shaking in pain and asks if she hit him too hard. He tries to recover from this and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. This girl is the head of the 6th guild in Yellow Country, Hamaiho. She says something big must be going on if even he's here. Park Wanti, the head of the Canis Guild, the 3rd guild in the country, says he can say the same thing. Maiho asks, did he grow a mustache to flirt with her? It is very cute. 1T refuses and says he's just been busy lately. They both enter the office, where many other people are already sitting at a large table. Shin Haesung turns in their direction and notices that they have come here. He turns to them and asks who is there. Is that Park Wanti? Maiho sighs in displeasure at seeing him and says that it's that boastful man again. Wanti went to the window and asked what was wrong with him. Haesung asks why is he so cold. he could at least greet him. Wanty turns his head with his eyes closed and sees that if he's finished, then he wants to take his seat. Hee-sung says Odin's Tower, and that immediately caught Wanty's attention and angered him. He says with a cruel smile that he heard that the first team of the Canis Guild went there recently, but I haven't heard from them in the last few days. He can't help but wonder how things are going. The head of the second guild in the country, the Shang Guild, Kim Il-gon, says that this is enough, he should stop it. Hee-sung asks, didn't they say the results weren't good enough? He apologizes and says that his memory is not the same as it was before. Wanty is very angry with him, but he doesn't say anything and doesn't show his emotions. Miho is confused by this and looks at him in silence, noticing what is happening to him. Wanty's hand twitches at how angry he feels about what happened. At that moment, someone opens the door and enters. 2 guards are holding the door, and one of them says that the head of the association has arrived. This is the head of the Korean Hunter Association, Oh Byung-hoon. He notices 2 guild leaders who have had a conflict and asks, is something wrong? Wanty continues to suppress his anger and closes his eyes to calm down. He endured it, sat down in his seat, and exhaled at the same time. Il-gon closed his eyes, a little relieved that the conflict was over. Byung-hoon looks at them and thinks that something definitely happened here. He sat down in his seat and says it's nice to see all the guild heads. First of all, he wants to thank them all for their feedback. Their country recently received a disaster warning from the International Hunter Association. Hee-sung thinks about Thekal with a very big smile. Byung-hun opens the fold. He says they have no specific details other than that the portal will open in their country. Kim Il-gon slams his hand loudly on the table and asks loudly, is he asking them to cover the entire country, so still wait until the portal appears? Byung-hun hides his face behind a folder and says that's why they're here, to hold a meeting on this issue. All they know is that it will happen soon. People say they don't even have enough hunters to complete their tasks. How can they be expected to be able to stop a disaster without being properly informed about when and where it will happen? And will he pay the hunters who will be sent to deal with the disaster? Byung-hun thinks about it with a Wanty raises his hand and asks if he would like to hear his suggestion. Byung-hun is very happy that he gave him the opportunity to change the subject, agrees with him, and says that he can speak out. Wanty looks at the document in his hand and says that each guild should prepare a group of hunters that can be sent out immediately in case of an emergency to monitor the surrounding areas, and during a disaster, all guilds will concentrate their main forces in the right place. All guilds without exception. Those guilds that refuse to cooperate will be severely punished. Byung-hun looks at the documents in his folder and says it seems like a reasonable offer. Anyone else want to speak out? If there are no more proposals, they can vote. Those who support this idea should raise their hands. Some guild leaders raise their hands and think they can do it. They are already responsible for patrolling their region. Miho also raises her hand, and her face is slightly flushed. Hee-sung also raises his hand with a very sly smile. Byung-hun closed his eyes, exhaled, and says he believes they have come to an agreement. In this case, they will follow the suggestion of the head of Park Wanty. They must protect their area and maintain close communication with each other. After a while, somewhere on the street, Sang-woo is walking along the road, humming a tune and thinking that time is flying fast on the first day and classes are already over. He notices in front of him that Hae-young is talking to a guy. He takes out his phone and says that she is really his type. He would leave as soon as she shared the number with him. She is embarrassed and says that she already said that she has a boyfriend. He again asks her to give him the number and says she shouldn't act like this. They can be friends. Sang-woo walks up to her and asks her what she's doing here. Hae-young was very happy when she saw, and the guy was embarrassed about it. She was going to call him teacher, but she changed her mind and asked with a happy expression, calling him baby. Did he finally come? Sunwoo is confused by what she said and asks, what did she call him? Hae-young hugs him and says that she's already been waiting for him. They must go. Sunwoo is embarrassed by this and looks at her blankly. After a while, when they walked a short distance away from that guy, Sunwoo asks, so he was forcing her to give him the number. So they left so quickly. Hae-young says that she told him that she had a boyfriend and he came over at that exact moment. She was embarrassed by what she said and says that in any case, she doesn't really have a boyfriend. Does he understand that? Sang-woo says he was silent. By the way, why did she ask him to buy her meat today? She has lessons. Hae-young says it's her school's anniversary today. He asks, is that why she's not in her school uniform. He was already beginning to think that something had happened. She asks, is something wrong? He can't take his eyes off her when she's in casual clothes. Maybe he wants her number. Sunwoo is angry about what she said and says that she already has her number. Notifications start coming to his phone in his pocket, and he reaches out to get it. He was surprised when he noticed this alert. Junmo wrote that the payment minus all expenses was transferred to his account. Sangwoo is very happy about what he saw and wonders, has he already earned 50 million? His clones are simply the best. He turns around and happily says that they have to go. She can choose any meat, even the most expensive. Hang is surprised when she hears this and asks, is this true? She eats quite a lot. Is he sure that he can pay for it? Sangwoo says that of course it is. They can eat veal because that's what he wants. Hang is surprised by this and asks, what did he say? But it's very expensive. Sangwoo says she can't think about money. Sometime later, at a restaurant that serves Korean veal, they sit in this restaurant and fry meat and other dishes in a small frying pan. When they cooked it, they immediately tasted it. Ha-young was very surprised by this and tells the teacher that it is very delicious. Sangwoo quickly eats it and says she's right. It's very tasty. She says it's really expensive though. Is he absolutely sure that he can pay for it? Sangwoo looked at her and says that he already said that she cannot think about money and just eat. Ha-young was very surprised that she noticed something. Sangwoo turns around, apologizes, and asks for more beef for the four of them. This restaurant also has many other customers sitting around eating and talking to each other. One of the guys was surprised when he noticed something on his phone. A show is playing on the TV screen, but some sounds interrupted it. On the screen there are inscriptions, an emergency message about a disaster. This is not an exercise, but a danger, monster invasion through the portal. The crash zone, the whole of South Korea, including Seoul. The host loudly says that this is not a drill. At the moment, a state of emergency has been declared throughout the country. A state of emergency has been declared throughout the country. He repeats that at the moment, a state of emergency has been declared throughout the country. All residents are advised to check the location of evacuation site. Around the same time, Jendo walks down the street and says that Sanwoo is a freak. His friend says he should stop doing this already. There's nothing they can do about it. He already had plans. Jendo cries and says it's not fair that he went with a girl while they are walking the streets alone. Zero Changwoo says they're not even sure if he's dating a girl. He didn't finish because he noticed something. He spots Sangwoo, who is eating at a restaurant with Ha-young at the same table. They happily. Changwoo is very angry about this and says that he will kill this traitor. Jang Seong is scared that he suddenly said this and asks what happened to him. Jendo's phone starts making noises because he received an alert. He looks at it and asks what happened. Changwoo continues to get angry at Sangwoo and tearfully calls him trash. Jiangxiang noticed that he received an alert and asks, what is it? His phone vibrates too. Jendo is confused about what he read and says that it seems like something bad is going on. People on the forum write that he was kicked out of the computer club. Is this the end of the world? What's happening? He received a warning. There's no need to react so sharply because of this. The shelter is empty. None of his family is going to go there. And the school will be cancelled, right? Changwoo ignores this, continues to cry because of the resentment towards Sangwoo, and says that he thought they were friends. Yoon Seong asks if it's too quiet for the approaching disaster. Shouldn't they have it turned on the siren? Sangwoo goes outside and notices his friends who were standing on the street. Ha-young follows him out, and he asks what are they doing here? Young Seong covers Changwoo's mouth and says that they saw them eating together when they passed by. Jindu is a little confused and asks who is it next to him. Is this his girlfriend? Ha-young was very embarrassed by what he said, and Sangwoo says that he said it wasn't like that. She's his student. He just gave her a treat for helping him last time. He calls their names and says that she should meet them. They are his friends from university. Ha-young bowed, said hello, and gave her name. This news made them very happy. They greeted her back and Changwoo asks, so is she his student? Sangwoo picks up a small bag from the restaurant that contained food from the restaurant and hands it to Ha-young. He says that since they didn't have time to eat, he asked her to pack the leftovers with her so that she can eat with her parents if he wasn't going to go straight to the shelter. Ha-young was very happy about it, agreed, and thanked him. Sangwoo says she shouldn't go anywhere. She should go straight home. Her parents must be worried about her. Changwoo is surprised by this and thinks that he really is acting like a teacher. Han is confused about this and asks, "Is that all for today, and nothing else?" Sangwoo says with a calm expression that her parents won't be happy if they go out some weary after the alarm is announced. His friends look at him with displeasure and say that he is a very grumpy old man. It's such a cliché. Sangwoo gets angry about this and loudly says that they should shut up. He keeps getting angry and says they should all go home. Young Seong takes Changwoo away and says they need to leave. Han also leaves and tells the teacher that they will meet soon. Sunwoo sighs at what's happening, wants to say something about it, but doesn't finish his sentence. His attention is drawn to the fact that someone next to him is laughing out loud and saying that they need the next one. Several drunk guys come out of the bar, laughing loudly and discussing something with each other. Sangwoo looks at these people and wonders if he's the only one who reacts so keenly. Everyone acts as if nothing has happened. He looks at the screen of his phone and types something on the screen. He called Junmo and immediately answered his call and calls him a hunter. Sunwoo asks, did he also hear the disaster announcement? Junmo agrees and says that he was just about to get in touch about it. Sunwoo asks if there are any more specific details regarding this announcement that he needs to know. Junmo says this is unofficial information, but the association plans to remain in this position for at least 3 months. Sangwoo is very surprised by this and asks if it's too long. Junmo says that this is due to the fact that the exact location of the portal is unknown. But the number of monsters that will go through this is really huge, and this is a dangerous situation. It is said that even a class monsters are expected to appear. Sunwoo gritted his teeth in anger and says that's why the public is being provided with minimal information. Junmo agrees and says that this way they can say that they warn people if something serious happened. He gets dressed and says he's heading to the shelter right now. Hunting grounds should already be closed, so it will be impossible to hunt. Sangwoo says that he understood that, so he will go too. Junmo agrees and wishes him the same. After some time in his house, Sunwoo calls clones number 1 and 2 and asks how they are feeling. The second clone meditates and says that everything is fine with him. Number 1, who is very badly injured, says she's still alive. Sangwoo looks at them with a sad expression and thinks that it looks like number 2 is fine, which can't be said for number 1. His injuries were too serious. Sunwoo notices the system window in front of him, which says that the clone skill of the 3rd level is active. There is no cooldown time. He can summon a clone. He says it's good. He'll call up number 1 again. After that, he immediately uses his skill. Some time later, clone number 1 was fine again, wearing his clothes and looking at his hand. Sangwoo hands him a cap and tells him that he should wear this to avoid getting confused. Another clone enters the house and breathes heavily due to fatigue. Sangwoo notices him and says that number 3 is back. He looks around the room and says that in that case, they can go home now. Sometime later, Sunwoo stops in front of the door to his old house and wonders, so this is going to last for 3 months. He presses the bell several times and it makes a loud enough sound. When the door is opened, Sangwoo shows him a bag of meat from the restaurant and tells his mother that he has returned home. His mother was very surprised when she saw him and stared at him in silence for a few seconds. Sunwoo was confused about this and thinks that she really didn't recognize him. His mom is hesitant but still calls him by his first name. He agrees and says it's him, her son. She was very surprised when she heard this and asks how did he lose so much weight? Was he starving? His father looks out and asks, has their son come? When he sees it, he asks if it's really him. His sister runs out to them and asks loudly, is Big Brother really here? Once he gets home, he needs to look for his cute little sister first. She's about to ask why he's standing still, but she's surprised when she sees him. Sangwoo looks at her with a smile and doesn't say anything about it. She was shocked after seeing him and looks at him blankly for a few seconds. She asks who he is. Sunwoo tearfully remembers what Jendo told him about not being recognized by his parents and thinks that he was right. His mom notices the clones standing behind him and asks, is he here with friends? Why are they all wearing masks? Sangwoo takes off his shoes and says they are not his friends. He turns to the clone Sant, says they can take off their masks. The clones immediately do what he told them to do, which surprised everyone in his family very much. They all look in surprise at these 3 clones, who look the same and say loudly that they all have the same face. Their screams could be heard even on the street, and Sangwoo says he can explain everything after he explained it to them. One of his family members asks, so he needs to say that this is his skill. Sunwoo agrees and says that he took part in the awakening program about a month ago. They know about this, don't they? His mother says that she has heard that many young people are taking part in it, but she did not expect that he would also go there. His sister lies on the table with her eyes closed. His dad asks, so he also works as a hunter? Sang-woo laughed, agreed, and says he didn't mean to hide it. But his mother was outraged by this news and asks her son, isn't it dangerous? While his sister is texting something on her phone, Sang-woo says that she can see what skill he has. There's no danger involved, so she doesn't have to worry about it. He's being hunted by clones. He remembers something and says that whatever it was, they announced an impending catastrophe. They must go to the shelter. My father says that they have packed their things just in case, but first they need to observe the situation. Sunwoo asks, do they want to watch this? This catastrophe can happen at any moment. His father says he still has to go to work, and they can't just pack up and leave the house right away. Sang-woo looks at him with concern and thinks that he doesn't know how serious it is like the others, which is why the townspeople are generally so calm. If only the authorities had announced a monster invasion. He exhales and says that in that case, from this day forward, he will stay with them. His father is surprised by this and asks, what about his university? Sang-woo decided to lie to him and says that he received a message saying that school is cancelled. He thinks that if he can't convince them, then at least he should be there. He puts the bag on the table and says they can have dinner together. One of the family members is surprised by this and asks, is it really meat? Sang-woo says that he was at a restaurant, but because of the announcement, hee-ha. His mom says that in that case, he's probably hungry. The husband should bring the plates. His sister looked into the bag and happily and loudly says that it's Korean beef. Sang-woo looks at them happily and thinks that he should have visited them earlier. His sister looks at the clones and asks if they should eat too. All the clones were immediately overjoyed when they heard this. Sunwoo says that clones can eat, but meat is too good for them. She can just give them rice. This greatly upset clones who heard it. Some time later, they put on the table a lot of different dishes that they will eat. The clones sit separately and gather to eat a large bowl of rice. Sang-woo says they're probably hungry, so they can start eating. They all thanked him for the meal. His sister covers her face with her hand and asks her brother if all four of them are eating and if he gets better again. Sang-woo says that won't happen. His mom smiles and says that whatever it is, it's been a long time since they got together as a family. My sister agrees and says she likes it. Sang-woo looks at them with a small smile because he is happy to meet his family. He is about to say something, but suddenly the wall next to him breaks and debris is flying towards them. Some time later, Sang-woo slowly opens his eyes and looks around after losing consciousness. He stands up slowly, holding his head, and is about to ask what happened here. He saw what happened there and was very much surprised by what had just happened. He sees that the upper part of the building has been destroyed, as well as one of the walls of this house. He also notices a lot of dragons, one of which was much larger than some buildings, and this surprised him very much. These dragons continue to fly through this city, leaving destruction and flames in their wake. The biggest dragon takes a deep breath and is about to release flames from its mouth. This dragon emits a very strong stream of flames from its mouth. With this torrent of fire, the dragon destroyed several large buildings that were in its way. Sang-woo was very surprised when he saw all the things that were happening in this city. He turns around and calls for his parents and sister. His mom and Ji-woo were fine and just passed out. He notices that number one's uniform is lying on the floor and wonders if he protected them from the explosion with his body. He heard loud noises. It caught his attention and he immediately looks in that direction. The two remaining clones emerge from the wreckage and look in his direction. Sang-woo walks up to them, notices that number 3 is missing an arm, and asks if he's okay. The clone says the bleeding has stopped. Sang-woo sat on the floor and thinks it's bad. Number 1 is gone and number 3 is seriously injured. He hadn't expected the portal to open so soon. His mom gets up slowly, moaning in pain, and he notices and calls out to her. She turns around and asks what happened. He wasn't hurt. All the other family members also get up and Sang-woo says he's fine. They need to get out of here as soon as possible. Dad was shocked by what he saw and loudly asks what happened to his house. Sang-woo takes out his weapon and says it's not that important right now. Apparently, the portal has opened. At the same time, many dragons fly through the air, shooting magic in different directions. The city were destroyed and pillars were toppled. Big monsters that walk on the ground with huge mouths grab people and are going to eat them. Cars that were parked next to buildings were littered with rubble, and another person is kneeling in front of one of the cars in which the guy is sitting. Dragons grab people who are hiding on the roof of a building with their paws. Many monsters that have passed through the portal go through the destroyed streets of the city. Sometime later, Sang-woo and his family packed a backpack, filling it with various food items in order to go to the shelter. He asks if she's wearing everything right. Ja-woo puts on a set of armor, agrees, and says that although the protection is still too much for her. Sunwoo says it was worn by number 1. She asks if his clone is okay. He agrees and says she doesn't have to worry. Something is flying towards them at high speed, and it makes a very loud sound. It's something falling next to them with a loud sound, which really surprised them. When the dust from the fall cleared, they saw that a monster that was still alive and making noises had fallen down next to them. Sunwoo looks at this and wonders, did this monster fall from the sky? He notices other monsters falling to the ground and wonders if a portal has opened in the sky. They seem to have fallen because they can't fly. He finishes off the monster that fell next to them and thinks that it looks like they were lucky. The system notifies you that your mana has increased by 0 and 1 points. Meanwhile, Ji-woo tries to open the front door with all her might, but she can't. She asks why the door won't open. The father hits the door with a bat and says that the door must have broken. The door doesn't move a millimeter. Sang-woo snatches the bat out of his hand and tells Dad that he has to stop. Dad was a little embarrassed and agreed with him. Sang-woo is about to hit very hard with this bat, and the system notifies that the strike skill is activated. His eyes light up with energy due to the use of this energy. Sunwoo hits the door handle very hard with the bat. He broke the door handle and it fell to the ground. After that, he throws a very strong kick and knocks the door down. He goes down the hall and says they have to go. His entire family was very surprised by what he had just done. After a while, they reach the building with the number 12 written on it. Sang-woo looks around worriedly and says this can't be happening. He sees collapsed buildings along with the bodies of monsters and cars. He turns and asks how far away is the nearest shelter. His dad says it's about 2 kilometers away. Some liquid is leaking from the roof, and slime-like monsters are gathering together. Skeletons walk through the streets of a burning city, and their bones fall to the ground. The stone golems that are lying on the ground have collapsed and are going back up. Sang-woo is surprised when he notices this and thinks that there are monsters that aren't affected by falling from a height. Would they be able to walk 2 kilometers under such circumstances? Ji-woo calls his brother and says they can use the underground tunnels. There's a temporary shelter there. Sung-woo is surprised when he hears this and asks, so there was a shelter under their house. He goes after them and says that then they should go there. He stopped when he heard someone calling for help next to him. He spots a man lying under the rubble and asks for someone to help him. He tries to get out from under the rubble of the building, on which lies a dead monster, and the guy calls for help because he was crushed. Suddenly, the monster that was lying on the rubble of the building above the guy opens its eyes and mouth. This monster starts to climb up and grabs the edge of a broken building. The guy who was pinned down noticed that this monster was starting to rise up and screamed loudly out of fear. This monster that suddenly rose up was a D-class troll. The guy continues to try to get out of the rubble and loudly asks for someone to help him. Sunwoo's father was very confused about what he was seeing and didn't know what to do. He turns to his son and says that he should think rationally. They are in no position to help anyone. They must go down. Sunwoo thinks that number 3 can't fight properly, and it's impossible to save him with just number 2. The guy starts crying and asks very loudly for someone to respond. There's actually a person here. Sunwoo looks at this guy, worries, and thinks that he himself is not a clone to use the skill on. His face shows great excitement and thinks that if he dies, it will be the end. His heart starts beating faster due to the intense excitement as he tries to make a decision. All the members of his family are confused because he stopped at the place and his mother asks what he is doing. He must go with them. The guy continues to cry because of a very strong fear and calls his mother very loudly. Sang-woo closes his eyes and tries to make this decision and doesn't know what to do. He has made up his mind and tells his family that as soon as they come down, they should close the door properly and wait for him there. His mother and sister were confused when they heard this and called out loudly for him. Sang-woo tells number 2 that he has to go after him. Number 3 must protect his family until they reach the shelter. Jaewoo is very worried about him and asks, "Is he crazy? Didn't he see what was happening outside? He must go down with them." His father asks, so he decided to go there. Sangwoo says that if he forgot, he's still a hunter. He runs to help a guy who is trapped in the rubble, and Jiayu tries to stop him by calling his name. The remaining clone stops her and pulls her back, while Sangwoo thinks that in a situation where monsters are falling from the sky, the hunter can only do one thing. At this point, the troll swings its fist and is about to strike at the guy who is lying under the rubble. Sangwoo managed to stop the monster's attack with a blow to its head. Because of that kick, the troll clutched at his face, which he had hit, and Sunwoo thinks, as a hunter, it's his job to kill monsters, right? The troll is back on its feet and screams loudly due to the pain of the punch it just received. Sangwoo puts the bat on his shoulder and tells number 2 that he has to take this person to a safe place. The clone immediately agrees with him and looks at him with a serious expression. Sangwoo points to a troll that is standing on the rubble of a building and tells the freak that he has to go to it. He stands calmly in front of the monster, who holds a huge club in his hand and glares at him angrily. A monster is hiding in the shadows on the floor of one of the ruined buildings, looking at Sangwoo and repeating after him what he just said. While he distracts the troll's attention, the clone walks over to the guy who was lying under the rubble and lifts a large stone slab so that he can climb out. He manages to lift this slab of stone by leaning his shoulder to lift it. Sangwoo turns to him and asks if he can go. The guy cries because of the fear of monsters, agrees with him, thanks him, and says that he is very grateful to him. The troll is very angry about what happened and makes very loud noises. Sangwoo looks at this monster while a clone walks towards him and says that this freak is just huge. Number 2 has to get a gun. The clone immediately obeyed him and pulls out a weapon hidden in a wooden pipe. Sunwoo takes out the crystal he got from Fisherman and says that they will use everything they have. He looks at this crystal that he just took out and thinks that now is not the time to be selective. He throws this crystal to number 2 and says he has to eat it. The clone caught this crystal and immediately agreed to it. He immediately starts gnawing on this crystal and swallows it all. He stands still for a while and some changes occur with his body. His skin, eye color, and pupil shape have all changed. He's turning into a monster. Sangwoo looks in surprise at number 2, who turns into a monster and groans at the changes. His clone finally turned into a lizard that looked like a human, and his hands changed and his fingers turned into claws. Sangwoo asks, is he still on his side? He thinks that people like him are not to be trifled with, growls and agrees with him. The troll, who looks at this with strong surprise, asks some question and does not understandingly points a finger first at himself and then at them. Sangwoo notices this, refuses, and loudly says that he is not on their side. The system notifies several times that his strength has increased, and Sangwoo looks at his hand and thinks that this is great news and he is very lucky. He's glad that his hands were fine. Other than the increase in strength due to his clone, no other effects seem to have been transmitted to him. Sangwoo looks at the evil troll who is standing next to him and says that he should be ready for the hunt to start. The monster begins to slowly walk towards them and slowly carries its huge club over the rubble of houses that lie on the ground. He continues to slowly carry his club across the floor and collects a lot of rocks. The troll makes a sharp swing with his club and throws a lot of large stones in their direction. Sunwoo dodges these rocks, but one of them still grazed his face and left a small cut. He immediately became serious and makes a lot of bat strikes to repel all these stones that fly at him. The troll has gotten close enough to him and is already reaching out with its huge hand to grab him, but Sangwoo doesn't have time to notice and stands still. The clone very quickly ran up to the side of this monster and unexpectedly struck out with his sword and cut off the giant monster's arm. He swings his sword arm back as blood spurts from the monster's wound. As the troll's severed arm falls to the ground, a surprised Sangwoo turns to the clone and thinks that this sword is amazing. The monster starts to scream very loudly due to the pain it suffered from losing its arm. The troll has gone berserk and throws a lot of quick blows with the club in different directions, but not one of his blows misses the target. Sangwoo runs towards this monster with a bat in his hand and thinks that fortunately, it is much slower than the fishman he met earlier. He jumps up and in a few jumps on the monster's body climbs up and swings the bat. Sunwoo hits the troll's head very hard with his bat and puts all his strength into it. Unexpectedly, the monster blocked this very strong blow with its hand that wasn't fully regenerating yet. Sunwoo is very surprised at what happened and is thinking about it. Why does this troll have a hand again? The monster strikes hard with its recovering arm and knocks it back several meters. Sunwoo falls to the ground at high speed and covers his head with his hand to reduce the fall damage. When he stopped, he immediately sat up, looks at the troll, and says that he has a great ability to regenerate. Sunwoo looks at the clone. He strikes many different points with his sword, and thinks that the monster's skin itself is not so dense and he can easily injure this troll. But it recovers too quickly. There's a look of excitement on his face because of this, and he thinks it's too bad, because it's almost impossible to deal damage to such an opponent. Sunwoo stands up, leaning on his bat, and tells number 2, who is dodging the monster axe, that he should knock it down for a while. He jumps to the side and swings his sword, then very quickly rushes towards the monster. The clone runs very fast next to the monster's leg and hits one of the troll's legs. Because of this injury, the monster fell to one knee and lets out a very loud growl due to the pain. Unexpectedly, Sunwoo made two well-aimed shots at the monster's eyes, which caused it to start growling in pain. He continues to aim at the monster that is standing in front of him and says that despite the rapid regeneration, it will definitely be able to blind him for a while. Number 2 runs very quickly next to the troll's second leg and strikes that leg. Due to his injuries, the monster fell to the ground and cries because he was shot in the eyes. The troll's eyes start to regenerate quickly, but it continues to cry and scream in pain. What caught his attention was what was happening next to him, and the troll was staring at it intently. Sunwoo has come very close to this monster, swings his battle, and activates the strike skill. He's going to strike with a smile, and says it's a great place. Sunwoo hits the monster's face with the bat, and the impact is so strong that its face goes inside. He doesn't stop there, continues to put all his strength into this punch, and shouts loudly. He was able to destroy the troll's head with a single blow of the bat, and its body was thrown back violently. After that, Sunwoo sat on the ground and looked at the system window while his clone stood nearby and looked at the body of the newly defeated troll. Sunwoo shakes the hand that he used to deliver the final blow due to the intense pain and his hand makes a loud crunch. He looks down at his injured arm and wonders, is this a side effect of his skill? Either way, the impact power he gets is worth it. Sunwoo looks at the troll's body lying next to Hyman, thinks that it looks like the monster's strength is comparable to that of a fishman. Considering that the fishman was strong because of the cursed sword and the monster is strong without it, he gets to his feet and tells them to go inside. His sister must be worried sick. Sunwoo checks his pockets and asks where did his phone go. It must have fallen out while he was fighting. He calls number 2 and asks him to lend him his phone. His clone immediately agrees and hands him his phone. Sunwoo laughs and says that if you think about it like this, if he goes to the shelter like this, he will be kicked out. Just as he said that, a very strong and loud explosion occurred behind him. This caught his attention and he immediately turned back. There are many different monsters attacking people who run away from them and loudly ask for someone to help them. Sunwoo was embarrassed by this and covered his face with his hand. Some time later, in this ruined city, loud sounds of machinery are beginning to be heard. Several planes fly over the destroyed streets of this city. A huge shadow appears over the blown-up engine room, blocking out the moonlight. A huge monster steps on this car with its foot, which destroyed this car to the end. This monster was a huge lizard with a very long tail. This monster raises its head and is about to release flames from its mouth, but something explodes in its mouth and it stops it. This lizard turns around, and at the same time another shell hits its head, which attracted its attention. The person who fired this projectile is standing not far away from this monster with a hand pointed in its direction, from which smoke still emanates after using the skill. The ones who attacked this monster were the Red Fire Guild of the 9 rank. The head of this guild says that they should prepare. Their target is the leader of these monsters. The head of the 7 rank Scorpion Guild says that they can't lose to other guilds. If they beat them by even one monster, they will receive a salary for several months. The huge lizard opens its mouth wide and lets out a very loud roar. The people from these 2 guilds teamed up and attacked this huge monster. Due to the battles with monsters in different parts of the city, many big explosions are raised. Sometime later, one of the planes is flying over the destroyed street of this city. The pilot looks around and says that they have arrived at their destination and opens the hatch. After he warned about this, the hatch located in the back of the plane began to slowly open. A few people are peeking out through this trapdoor and looking at the ruined city that lies below them. The head of the Canis Guild, Parkwanti, looks at this with a serious expression and says that everyone should be ready to jump. At the same time, several monsters begin to fly behind the plane, which makes loud noises. On the top of the plane, a hatch opens from which several guns protrude. This weapon is aimed at the monster that was chasing the plane and starts shooting. The guy who was on the plane loudly says that megalosaurs are moving away from them. Wanty turns to him and loudly tells him that since there are several guilds targeting them, joining them will cost a lot of manpower. They must prioritize the evacuation of survivors. They continue to fly over the street, where many different monsters are walking. One of the hunters at this time defeated the monster, whose body lies on top of the person and, with a joyful expression on his face, takes the gem that he got from the monster. Another hunter collects valuables from the body of a murdered girl lying on the road. Wanty looks at these hunters with disdain and says that they are all damned freaks. The pilot says that several survivors are seen 700 meters to the north. They should check their condition. Wanty concentrates his energy near the eye and says on the radio that he has understood it. He spots a group of survivors that he's just been told about and looks at them. He sees Sang-woo with his clone, who is standing with several other people surrounded by monsters. Wanty keeps looking at them and wonders, is this a hunter? He's holding up well, but the number of monsters is too large to deal with just the two of them. He puts a gas mask over his face and says he's heading north. The pilot says he understood it. Wanty turns to the remaining people on the plane and loudly says that they should unite and start the rescue. All these hunters agree with his order. After that, Wanty immediately jumps out of the plane and begins to fall down. The device on its back opens up and releases its wings. He starts flying towards a group of survivors who were surrounded by monsters. Sunwoo is breathing heavily, looking at the monsters that are standing around him and thinking that he planned to come back as soon as he kills the big monster. At this time, the armed goblins continue to slowly head in his direction. Agitated by what is happening, the woman holds the child's head to her and says that they need to hold on a little longer. Sunwoo turns to this group of survivors and loudly says that they should run to the shelter that is in the basement right now. The guy standing next to him turns around and says with a surprised expression that there are also monsters behind them. Sunwoo attacks one of the goblins with his bat and tells number 2 that he must take care of what is happening in the rear. The clone breathes heavily from exhaustion and agrees with him. One of the goblins armed with a dagger pounces at a man with a very happy expression on his face, and that man screams out in fear. Number 2 noticed this and managed to save him by plunging his sword into the stomach of a goblin that was about to attack him. Sang-woo takes out his gun and shoots at several goblins who are standing right in front of him. He is very tired from fighting monsters and thinks that he can't use the strike skill anymore due to the energy consumption. Suddenly, something bursts out of the rubble next to them, and a very strong explosion occurs. A huge bird-like monster crawls out from under the rubble, and it makes a very loud sound, which is noticed by Sang-woo. He dodges the monster's head attack and says that the freak has risen again. This monster has left its beak in the ground, and seething sounds are beginning to come from the rubble. This monster releases some very hot liquid, which begins to fly in different directions. Sang-woo feels a very strong heat from this liquid, covers his body with his hands, and jumps back. The liquid flies towards the shocked people who stand next to him and look on in horror. Number 2 stands between the people who can't hide from this attack and the monster that released this liquid. He spreads his arms and protects these people who are so afraid that they can't run away. Senwoo begins to slowly climb up with the bat that he has placed on the ground. He looks at what's happening next to him, calls out to number 2, and says this can't be happening. The monster that was releasing the hot liquid is unaware of the huge paw above it, raises its head, and is about to release this hot liquid again. The other huge monster didn't pay attention to the monster, spitting hot liquid, and just crushed it. Sang-woo looks at the huge tiger that was covered in blood and crushed the monster. A very strong look of surprise appeared on his face due to what he had just seen. The goblins run away in terror after seeing this monster, and number 2 disappeared after protecting the humans from a very hot liquid. Sanwoo looks back with a horrified expression to assess the situation while the monster is about to attack him. Realizing how bad a situation he was in, he simply sat down on the ground out of desperation. He looks at the huge tiger's paw moving very fast towards him with a tired expression and says that this is the end. He closed his eyes and felt someone land a very strong punch with a loud sound. Sunwoo appears to be fine after what happened, but he still keeps his eyes closed for a while longer. He slowly opens one eye to look at what has happened, and something surprises him. Sunwoo opens his eyes and sees Wanti standing between him and the tiger, who has already put his sword back in its scabbard. A short period of time after his strike, the severed head of the huge tiger began to fall and blood flowed out from this wound. All the people who were here were shocked because of what had just happened. Wanti turns from the tiger's body to the people, removes his gas mask, and asks if everything is all right. Sangwoo looks at him in very strong surprise and tries to find the words to say to him. The body of a huge monster falls to the ground behind Want, and at this moment he calls his name and says that he is from the Canis Guild. At the same time, in an underground shelter where loud noises are heard, someone keeps making these noises while inside the shelter. A lot of injured people are sitting on the ground, and some of them look at Jiwoo in surprise, who loudly says that he should let her go. Some people are already looking at her with fatigue as she tries to escape from this shelter. Jiwoo tries to break free of the clone's grip and says that he should let her go, and then she will go save her brother. The clone says with a calm expression that he can't let her do this. She tries even harder to break free of the clone's grip, but it doesn't work. Jiwoo wonders why is he so strong. She tearfully asks, isn't he a clone of her brother? Isn't the clone supposed to save the original? The clone says that his priority is his teams, so he protects his master's family. Her father says that she should stop it because the others are already scared. Her mom is crying because she's worried about Sangwoo and calling his name. Jiwoo turns to them and asks if he doesn't care about him at all. After seeing what was happening outside with your own eyes, her father says that Sangwoo will be back soon. He believes in it and expects it. It's much more dangerous to go outside now, and the creature that stands in front of her is his skill. If the clone is fine, then so is it. Jiwoo is still worried about this and wants to protest something, but stops. Her father says that when he saw Sangwoo break through the door, he was convinced that he really works as a hunter. They must trust him. If they came out, they would only be able to hinder him. They should not give in to emotions. Jiayu has calmed down a bit and looks at him and listens in silence. She stops resisting the clone and agrees with him. Suddenly, they hear a loud knock on the door, and it attracts the attention of those who are in this shelter. Someone knocks on the door and unintelligibly asks for someone to help because there is a person outside. Jiwoo is happy about this and asks, could it be her brother? Her father says that this is not the case because the voice is different. Two men sitting next to each other ask, is this someone from another house? It doesn't seem to know the password. Shouldn't I just open it for him? On the screen that shows what the camera is shooting, nothing is visible from the outside and someone is asking for help. Sangwoo's mom asks, could it be one of the people their son saved? My father says the camera is too dark to tell. Jiwoo goes to the door and says she will open it. She enters the PIN code and thinks that someone is definitely at the door. She is sure that her brother is also there. The door to the shelter begins to slowly open. Jiwoo looks out the door and calls loudly for his brother. Instead of Sangwoo, she sees a wounded man with empty pupils. Both legs of this man standing in front of her slowly rise at the same time. The man's head tilts to the side, and the monster behind him calls for help. A look of incomprehension and horror appears on Jiwoo's face. The monster moves the man's body to the side, holding him by the neck with its paw. It has thrown the man's body very hard inside this shelter, and it crashes into the wall with a loud sound. The monster slowly comes out of the darkness and makes terrible loud noises. This fearsome monster walks into the shelter and says incoherent words that he has learned from humans, and also says that he is grateful that they helped him. It's a B-class monster, a screaming firefly. The man who is sitting against the wall looks at this with horror and is about to say something. He warns the others very loudly that it is a monster, and all the people start running away in the other direction from the entrance, while Jiwoo stands in front of this firefly in shock. Due to her intense fear of the monster standing in front of her, she can't even move. And while the other people are running in the other direction, the clone runs towards her with a knife in his hand. He is about to stab this monster, who is making loud noises, in the face with a knife. He was very surprised that the monster broke his knife with an incredibly fast movement. The firefly strikes with its paw and pierces through his body. A monster with a terrifying face looks at the clone, who is coughing up blood. That long paw that passed through his body rushed onwards. With this attack, Firefly was also able to injure Jiawu, who was in a state of shock and didn't immediately notice. Her parents are shocked by what has happened, and she turns to them with a bleary look and starts bleeding profusely from her mouth and wound. Her parents are very worried about this and loudly call out to Jiawu, who fell to the ground after this monster attack. The clone doesn't pay attention to what happened to him and Sister Sangwoo and pulls out his gun. He continues to stand with this monster that impaled him and shoots at the panel that opens the door. It destroys this panel, and a voice notification notifies that a critical damage has been detected. The monster was confused by the fact that the door to the shelter begins to close, and the voice reports that the emergency isolation has begun to start. The clone uses his skill, which causes his legs to grow very large and strengthen. He makes a very fast dash and pushes the monster out of this shelter so that it cannot harm other people in the shelter. The door continues to close, and the people in the shelter can see the clone holding back the evil monster. After that, the door to the shelter closes with a loud bang. Some time ago, Park Wanti gave his name and says that he is from the Canis Guild. He apologizes to them for being late. He holds out his hand to Sunwoo, who looks at him in surprise and thinks that he is sure that he was the one who did the wake-up program, but he didn't know that he was so strong. He takes his hand, calls out his name, and says that he is grateful to him for saving him. Wanti helps him up and tells him that he didn't do anything wrong. After all, he saw that he had saved all these people. He did a great job, although he almost died in the end. However, he didn't escape until the end, despite being able to if he wanted to. The people in the background are happy and say that they are saved. The Canis Guild is the best. Sunwoo is confused about what he was told and asks how could he do this when there are so many people here. One says that the conscience is easily turned off in dangerous situations. It really was amazing. The people he saved thank him with joyful expressions for what he did. Sangwoo laughs sheepishly, scratches his head, and thinks that he feels really good about being praised. He continues to laugh for a while longer with a silly expression on his face and thinks that although he wasn't doing it for a compliment, Oni doesn't say anything about it and looks at him. He drifts back into his memories and remembers what happened when he was flying after jumping out of the plane. He noticed something that caught his attention and surprised him greatly. He watched as number 2 protected ordinary people from the very hot liquid with his body. This made Want very confused and angry. He saw the clone disappear after that attack and wonders, what was that just now? That person disappeared into thin air, leaving only his clothes behind. He also notices a huge tiger that crushed another monster in front of Sunwoo. Wanti immediately grabbed his sword while heading there and notices the appearance of new monsters. He very quickly headed towards this tiger, which he then defeated with a single stroke of his sword. Wanti looks at him and thinks that he was wondering who the other person was. He's turned into mana, so it's possible. He doesn't finish his thought and asks, is he a hunter by any chance? Sunwoo picks up his bat, agrees with him, and says that however, he didn't become a hunter all that long ago. Wanti asks if he doesn't mind, can he find out what his skill is? Sunwoo was confused after hearing this question and looked at him. There's a drop of sweat running down his face from excitement, and he thinks that he just saved his life, so there's no point in hiding it. He was about to say something about what skill he possessed, and at the same time, he felt that his connection to the last remaining clone was gone. Sangwoo is very confused about this and thinks that he just lost contact with number 3. He apologizes and very quickly grabs the sword that number 2 used, even though it's a cursed weapon. Sangwoo starts running very fast towards the shelter where his clone was and says that his family is in danger. Wanti is confused about what just happened and wants to tell him something. He looks at Sangwoo running away alone with a sword in his hands and loudly says that it's dangerous to go alone right now. He calls the Canis rescue team over the radio and says that right now they should track his location and take the survivors to safety. The man tells him that this is the Bravo team. They'll be right there. Wanti stays where he is, hears sounds next to him, looks up and says that the portal hasn't closed yet. Meanwhile, Sangwoo continues to run quickly to the shelter where his family was hiding. The sword starts releasing a very strong dark red energy and says non-stop that it must die. Sangwoo's eyes fill with blood, and the veins on his face start to protrude due to the strain, and he says that he should shut up. The system notifies that the sprint skill has been activated. He starts running even faster, leaving a trail of dark energy in his wake. At the same time, there was a massive explosion somewhere. The guild and red fire leader extended his hand forward and used the fireball skill, then fired, aiming the projectile at the huge monster in front of him. There was an explosion after the impact, but the monster didn't react, and a guild member standing nearby shouted that he thought they needed more combat power. Let them focus on one point. But before he could finish speaking, the monster's huge paw crushed him, and he died instantly. After that, the man shouted to the support team that they should disperse. They have a wide area of damage. At the same time, members of the Scorpion Guild were fighting nearby. Their leader swung a huge two-handed sword, and purple liquid splashed everywhere. He gritted his teeth and thought that his skin was too thick for his venom to pass through. He moved to the leader of the Red Fire Guild, and when he noticed him, he said that everything was worse than they expected. Now is not the time to compete. They need to work together. Suddenly, a man appeared behind them and asked if he was offering to work together. The two of them immediately turned around and saw Shin Haesung in front of them and asked, "What is he doing here?" He smiled and said that he had come because he had heard that there was a lot money. The two men looked up, and Haesung said that they would never know, but absolute strength doesn't have to work with someone together. As he spoke these words, huge chunks of earth appeared in the sky above them, ready to fall down at lightning speed. At the same time, there were shouts in the shelter, mixed with the name of Ji-woo. She sighed heavily, and one of her parents said that she was injured. Let someone bring a first aid kit. Her father began to hold the wound on her stomach and tearfully asked Hernet to fall asleep. She looked up at them with the last of her strength and said that she was in a lot of pain. Her mother started to unwrap the bandage and told her to let her hold on a little longer. But it was too late, and there was a sudden clang as something tore through the wall. Jia-woo's parents immediately looked in that direction and saw smoke coming from that cut in the wall. A second later, the wall began to deform, sliding up, and a firefly crawled into the shelter, reproducing the screams of its victims. The others in the shelter were horrified, and Ji-woo, realizing her situation, tearfully asked her parents to run away as soon as possible. The firefly continued to approach them, saying in the voices of its victims that they might die like this. Both parents took their daughter's hands and decided to stay by her side. Her mom started crying again, holding her hand with trembling hands, but Sang-woo came to their rescue just in time. He stopped behind Firefly, swinging his cursed sword. When Firefly heard him, he turned around, and the two of them looked into each other's eyes. His father also turned around and called out to his son wordly. Sang-woo stood there with his teeth clenched and endured the growing voice in his head. When they saw him, the other people in the shelter asked in fright, "Who is he? Is he a hunter? Let someone help them already." Sang-woo's eyes were completely red, and he stood there panting as he peered into the room. He saw a firefly and then looked at his parents, who were sitting next to his sister and crying. He saw that his sister was in a very bad state and wasn't moving. Then he felt like he was getting a chill. Tears started to flow from his eyes, and then he gritted his teeth in rage. Under the influence of the cursed sword and the surging emotions, he completely stopped holding back and swung the sword sharply. There were sounds of impact and drops of blood splattering the floor and walls. The huge firefly's bloody paw froze in midair as Sang-woo lunged forward and swung his sword, and the monster hit him in the shoulder in response. Blood spurted from a deep gash on his shoulder, but he ignored it. Firefly turned around and stuck out his tongue, saying Jiayu's name. Sang-woo's sword was stained with blood, and then bright red flashes began to radiate from the blade. And Sang-woo gritted his teeth as rage and pain in his shoulder grew. He spun around and ran towards the firefly again, shouting loudly in rage. The firefly was still standing in one place, waiting for him. Seeing that it was attacking, the monster prepared itself and raised its paw to strike. A moment later, Sang-woo approached the monster and was about to strike. But suddenly, he was intercepted by the deputy head of Canis, and together with him jumped to the side. And Park 1T will appear in front of the firefly. He resolutely stood in front of the monster looking up. The firefly opened its mouth and reached out with a trembling hand, while its second-in-command landed with Sang-woo and said with a smile that she had caught it. Right after that, 1T suddenly jumped up and swung his leg, and then hit the firefly with all his strength, from which the monster was thrown back. The girl saw that Sang-woo's wound was gushing blood and cursed, saying that his wounds were serious. Sang-woo didn't answer. He raised his head and shouted, and she asked, "What is it?" Berserk state. She activated the Manhwa transfer skill by lighting a magic circle near her hand and told him to wait for a moment. She abruptly lowered her hand and sent her power straight at Sanwoo, driving away all the sinister aura that came from the sword. After that, he felt better and calmed down, and all the ominous aura in the moment divorced. He finally released the sword, and Wanty asked how he was. She said that, to be honest, not really. Let him kill that monster quickly. Blood spurted out of Sun Woo's mouth, and he coughed, saying with the last of his strength that she was over there. The girl began to hold his wound with her hands and said that he should not talk. He had an open wound. Sangwoo continued. He said that he should not talk. He said that his sister is there. She is injured. Park Won-T's face darkened for some reason at these words. Sangwoo placed a trembling hand on the girl's arms and tearfully begged to be saved. A blue aura immediately flashed around Won-T's sword and body, and he told him not to worry. Firefly saw that something was wrong with his opponent and shouted loudly to attack. And Park Won-T, still standing resolutely in place, told Sangwoo that neither he nor his sister will die today. Sunwoo seemed to calm down a little, and Won-T went to the monster and said that he should rest for a while. It'll all be over soon. As time passed, the head of the association sat in his office and thought deeply about something, listening to the news that the situation was getting out of hand. On his desk in front of him were documents with a rough estimate of the destruction of each region. He recalled the day of the guild leaders' meeting. After finishing, he and his subordinate left the hall, and he said that as soon as they were ready, they would prepare everything. Suddenly, the head of the association was called out from behind. He turned around and saw Shin Hee-sung standing in front of him, informally saying that he would like to consult him. The subordinate of the association head got angry and said that it was rude. Let him watch his manners. Bang Hoon raised his hand and said that everything was fine. What is it? Hee-sung shifted his gaze to his subordinate and called him Mr. Scary Shoulders, asking if he could leave them for a while. This is an important conversation. The man became even angrier, and the head of the association nodded at him. After that, they went to his office, and Hee-sung asked if he was going to evacuate all the people at once. Bang Hun confirmed his words and said that they should minimize losses. They will announce the expected destruction of the invasion and evacuate the people. Hee-sung asked if he was going to tell them everything. Bang Hun asked him what he was getting at. Hee-sung grinned and said that they didn't even know when it would happen. In such a situation, he is about to announce that he expects an invasion of a class monsters. Let everyone drop their jobs and run, and he wants to organize a lockdown of the entire country for 3 months. He let out a sigh and asked, can he imagine what will happen next? Bang Hun said nothing, and Hee-sung leaned on his desk with both hands and exclaimed that everyone will blame the association. Anyone who loses something will want to tear them to pieces. He doesn't even know if his head will still be on his shoulders in a month, let alone 3. He went behind him and rubbed his neck, saying that it didn't bode well for him either. But Byung-hoon interrupted him and exclaimed, then what did he think he should do? Hee-sung said that he shouldn't be told that the monsters will be a class. Let it hide the magnitude of the impending invasion. Let them blame themselves for not evacuating in time. He looked out the window at the gorgeous view and said that if he were in his place, he wouldn't be holding a meeting or announcing anything to the public. Why would he arrange this meeting like a complete idiot? Now all the guild heads are aware of this situation. These words angered the head of the association, and he exclaimed, how can he say that? Does he have any idea how many people might die? Hee-sung responded by exclaiming that this is the good part. He slammed his fist down on the glass with a mad smile and exclaimed, portal, let it open. Will people die? The more they die, the more they will need them. The army can't do anything about monsters that are higher than D class. People can only rely on them, the hunters. He put his hand on his shoulder and said that he had misunderstood something. Does he think he's offering it to him? The association head's face was covered in cold sweat, and he squeezed his eyes shut as he made up his mind. Remembering all this, he held his head and continued to listen to the news of what was happening in the portal opening area at the moment. As time passed, the clone Sangwoo was doing push-ups and his hands were already shaking. While Sangwoo was eating chips, he lay on the back of his clone and told him to let him work harder. The growth rate of the force has slowed down recently. His clone agreed, and as he popped the chips into his mouth, he smiled and thought that this was the best skill. They earn money for him by working for him. Long live the cloning skill. His characteristics grow without his participation. Hee ha. Suddenly, he received a message from Junmo saying that he was on the spot. Sang-woo looked at his phone and said that Mr. Agent had finally arrived. He called out to No. 1 and told him to wake up. They were going to make money. After that, they both went to the place where the agent was waiting for them. When Junmo saw them, he smiled and said that they were finally here. Sang-woo wished him a good morning and told him that he needed this guy to be on the rabbit hunting grounds with him. Number 1 went to the car, and Junmo asked, "Where's number 2? Sang-woo replied that he was practicing. Junmo asked why he wasn't doing it too. It would help him become stronger much faster. Moreover, its strength is twice that of the clones. Sang-woo laughed and said that was true, but wouldn't it be better to let the clones do it? He just doesn't want to. In fact, he never really wanted to become a hunter. After all, he makes enough money by hunting rabbits. Do they need physical strength in their day? It's just his opinion. Junmo said that he just suggested because he has a huge potential that he doesn't take full advantage of. He could be a better hunter. Sang-woo laughed and asked, "What? He just needs to take care of himself." Junmo's mood suddenly changed and he asked, "Is that what you mean? Is that why he ended up like this?" After saying that, the atmosphere abruptly changed. A huge wound appeared on Sang-woo's shoulder and blood gushed out. Out of fear, he screamed and exclaimed, "What the hell?" Junmo's eyes were filled with tears of blood and he put his hand on Junmo's injured shoulder and said that it was enough for him. "Isn't that right?" Sang-woo screamed even harder in pain and backed away. But suddenly, he felt like he collided with someone. He immediately turned around and saw his family, who also had tears of blood streaming from their eyes, and they asked, "Is that right?" Sun-woo fell to the ground in fear and put a hand on his shoulder, gasping for breath. His mother asked him, did he become a hunter? His father said that it turns out he left them and left. His sister with a huge wound in her stomach came up to him and asked him to save her. Sun-woo was terrified. He started to choke and screamed loudly when he jumped out of bed after seeing this nightmare after he woke up from his dream. He caught his breath and looked around. He was in the hospital and was lying on a bed near the window. A man's voice came from the side, saying that it looked like he was having a nightmare. Is he all right? Still breathing heavily, Sang-woo looked at the man and saw that it was the one who had saved him. Wanti crossed his arms and said that he shouldn't move too fast. Sun-woo asked, "He's Mr. Wanti, right? He's the one who brought him here." Suddenly, he felt a great pain in his shoulder and gritted his teeth. Wanti told him to be careful. The doctor said he was in a bad condition. The wound was deep, but he was lucky. Sang-woo thanked him and said that he had saved him not just once, but twice already. Wanti replied that it was all nonsense. He'd like to talk to him a lot, but it's not his turn. A smile appeared on his face, and the door to the ward opened. Sang-woo's parents immediately ran inside, out of breath, and called out to their son in concern. Sang-woo called back a little dumbfounded, and his mom asked, "Is he okay?" That's why she told him not to do it. Her husband asked her to calm down, because he just woke up. After that, the doctor came. He looked at the document and said that he would first say that the operation was successful. They need to continue monitoring him for now, but he's recovering pretty quickly. So in a month, he'll be able to return to normal. Sun-woo asked what happened to the portal. How many days have passed? They replied that 4 days had passed since then. Woo patted his head and said that he didn't remember much before he passed out. He remembered something and immediately became nervous. He said his sister's name and asked what was wrong with her. The doctor looked down and said nothing, and his parents did the same. Sun-woo asked, "Is she okay, right?" He became even more worried and asked why they were silent. What happened? His sister was also in the hospital at the time, but was unconscious. The doctor said that they took care of the wound in the abdomen, but she was infected with the Ma virus, a mana scavenger. Sun-woo leaned against the window where his sister was lying, and the doctor said that people usually get this virus from monsters coming out of the portal. The virus consumes and degrades its host's mana. In most cases, this virus does not cause significant problems. Each person has their own mana characteristics, so the virus dies before it can do anything in the body. But in quite rare cases, when the virus's mana characteristics are perfectly suited, it begins to absorb mana. Characteristics are perfectly suited. It begins to absorb mana, depriving the host of the opportunity to live normally. Sang-woo asked in a trembling voice, "Is there a way to cure her?" The doctor replied that with the current development of medicine, this is impossible. The virus syncs with the host's mana, so even healing magic won't work. The only way to save your life is to maintain the mana level in your body. There's a small chance, of course, if he finds an S-class healer like Bless, or gets an item like a mandrake or elixir from the other side of the portal, but it's incredibly rare. Sangwoo interrupted him and said that he thought it was worth a fortune. The doctor confirmed his words, while his parents fought back tears. Sangwoo didn't say anything. He continued to stare through the glass and thought that if he hadn't been distracted by others, this wouldn't have happened. He clutched the Roman IV stand in his hand and remembered how instead of helping his family, he had helped people he didn't know at all. His face continued to darken, and he said that if only he had put his family first, this wouldn't have happened. He remembered how his clone was taking Ji-woo away, and she was still rushing towards him. After that, she was seriously injured. Sangwoo gripped the Roman IV stand in anger at himself, and the wound on his shoulder opened up. The doctor called out to him worriedly, but he didn't listen and thought that if only he was stronger. He remembered seeing a huge tiger and thought he was going to die. And he remembered the screaming firefly that had wounded his sister. The Roman forest and shook with his strength, and his parents called out to him in concern. The doctor, seeing the blood on his shoulder, called for a nurse. He worriedly approached Sangwoo and asked him to calm down. His wound was opening up. But Sangwoo didn't pay attention. He thought that he had the ability to save everyone. Tears started to fall from his eyes, and he gritted his teeth and thought that if only hair had worked a little harder, everything would have been fine. He thought back to the happy dinner he'd had with his family while looking at his sister lying unconscious. They were all laughing together that day, and then the unexpected happened. As time passed, evening came and Sangwoo returned to his room. He sat on the bed and stared blankly at nothing in front of him until he heard footsteps coming from the other side. He looked away, and the door to the room opened and Hae-young walked in. He said her name, and she held a juice bag in her hands, smiled slightly, and greeted him. She apologized for the sudden visit, and Sangwoo replied that it was fine. He was grateful that she came by. Is her family okay? She went up to him and told him that everything was fine. Their house was damaged, but they were able to take shelter in a shelter. Sangwoo said it was good. He was worried because she was in the danger zone. Did Uncle Deokshul tell her where to find him? She said it seemed her father had contacted his parents because he couldn't get through to him. And then he knew he was here. Sangwoo suddenly remembered that he had lost his phone. He looked at the bag of juice bottles and asked her why she shouldn't address him less formally. Doesn't she think that's more acceptable in this case? He opened the juice bottle with a slight smile and said that she should just talk like that. Other things don't suit her. Han looked down in embarrassment and told him to get better soon. He still needed to teach her more. Hearing this, Sangwoo suddenly became thoughtful. After a short pause, he called out to her and she asked, "What is it?" He looked up at her and said with a small smile that there was something he wanted to tell her. He wouldn't teach her anymore. 2 weeks later, the doctor and the nurse went to Sunwoo's room. And he was surprised to say that, of course, he was recovering quickly before. But this. He looked at the empty bunk and asked, "Are all hunters like this?" The nurse replied that as far as she knew, this was not the case. Before leaving the hospital, Sangwoo took off his hospital clothes and threw them on the couch. Before putting on his shirt, he paused and felt his firefly scar. When Hae-young came over, he told her about his sister. He said that he didn't think he would be able to continue being her tutor. These words surprised Hae-young and made her worrying. And after that, he apologized. She smiled awkwardly and told him not to worry. She is grateful to him for everything. After that, she turned around and headed for the exit, saying that it didn't seem like he wanted to continue communicating with her. She stopped and tucked her hair behind her ear, telling him not to regret missing out on such a cute student, and let him believe that she would apply everything he taught her to get into that college. She paused for a moment, then said in frustration that she would also find a guy there. She turned to Sangwoo with a sad smile and said that he shouldn't take it back. Did he understand her? Sangwoo continued to dress, thinking of her words, her parents who had spent the night in the hospital, and his sister. He headed for the exit and walked outside with a determined look, thinking that he didn't have time for regrets anymore. He hailed a taxi and set off, looking up information about Park 1T along the way. Park 1T is the head of the Canis Guild, one of the top guilds in South Korea. Sangwoo thought, so this person is the guild leader. He's an important person. The car stopped, and the driver turned to Sangwoo and said they were there. Sangwoo thanked him and then got out of the car. He looked at the huge building in front of him, thinking that this was it. the main building of the Canis Guild. He went inside and was met at the entrance by a friendly girl, who asked with a smile how she could help him. He replied that he would like to meet Park Won-T. She asked if she had an appointment with him. He replied that it wasn't, but he said that he would like to talk to him. The girl apologized and said that without an appointment, it is impossible. Suddenly, a bearded man who was passing nearby asked her to wait. He walked up to Sangwoo and asked if his name was Young Sangwoo, right? Sunwoo looked at the huge man in front of him in surprise and replied in confusion that it was him. That's his name. The girl called out to the man with a confused smile, and he told her that he was their guest. He pointed to the side and said that he would show him upstairs. The captain was waiting there. Meanwhile, Park Won-T was sitting in his office, looking at a framed photo. There was a knock on the door, and a man called out to the guild leader. Won-T looked up and asked, "What is it?" The man replied that Mr. Young Sangwoo wanted to meet him. Won-T said to let him come in. The man opened the door to the office, and Sangwoo stepped inside, greeting Won-T. Won-T was glad to see him and got up from his chair, saying that it was good that he came. He's glad he's out of the hospital. It seems that he was discharged much earlier than the prescribed time. Sangwoo replied with a smile that it was all thanks to his kindness, so he decided to visit him right after he was discharged. He sat down on the chair and said that he would like to thank him again for everything he had done. Won-T closed his eyes and replied that he had only done what was obviously necessary. Sangwoo replied that he wouldn't say that. He saved his family and provided quick medical attention in such a situation. He is so grateful to him that he can't even put into words how much. However, he also wonders why he would go so far for them. Won-T looked down and Sangwoo said that the hospital said that he was the one who gave them SAPE, provided temporary housing for his parents, and paid the hospital bills for the mana infusion for his sister. He will also tell you about the reasons for such generosity. Hearing this, Won-T became nervous and looked at the hand that he had clenched into a fist. After a short pause, he replied that he also had a sister, but at the moment she is reported missing with her teammates. Sunwoo was suddenly taken aback by these words, and Won-T said that maybe that's why he saw a reflection of himself in him. In truth, he really let his feelings get the better of him, but he didn't do it to make him feel grateful or obligated. Sangwoo smiled slightly and thought that he had achieved. He asked why he wanted to see him as soon as he recovered. Won-T replied that he wanted to know about the ability he showed last time. His clones had a real body and the ability to do something, right? And the one who saved the other townspeople was also a clone. Sangwoo replied that he didn't plan on hiding it, but he's right, it's his skill. Won-T was glad in his mind and thought that he was right. He said he would start from the bottom line. He needed his strength. He asked him to help them save the first team of the Canis Guild. He got up from his chair and said that he was asking to be saved just as he had saved other survivors, without expecting anything in return. He doesn't ask for this in return for his support, but only he has a chance to save his sister and the other members of the first squad. He bowed to him and said that he was begging him. Sangwoo didn't say anything. He raised his hand to his face and thought about it. He remembered how that day he had asked him to save his wounded sister and cried, and he had helped him. Sangwoo said that he's already slept with his family once, so he thinks it's his turn. Won-T was overjoyed and asked, "What does that mean?" Sangwoo confirmed his words and said that he would do his best. Won-T happily thanked him, and Sangwoo smiled and only asked him to tell him what he needed to do to save them. Time passed. They moved to the training hall without further ado, and Sunwoo changed into more comfortable clothes and picked up a wooden sword. He said, "Where are they?" Won-T replied that this was their guild's training ground. They have pretty strong walls, so he can use his skills whenever he wants. Sunwoo looked at Won-T, who was standing in front of him holding a wooden sword, and asked if they shouldn't prepare to save the team as well. He said there were two reasons why they needed to do this first. First, it is true that the earlier they leave, the better their chances of successfully rescuing the team, but not that they don't have a lot of extra time. Thanks to his sister's abilities, the first team has an incredible amount of supplies that won't run out for the next 8 months. Sangwoo wondered, 8 months? Won-T turned away from him and said that the second reason was the dungeon level. Even though their guild is considered an elite B-class member, the first team was affected and couldn't leave the dungeon. Does he now understand what awaits them? Sangwoo frowned and replied that what he meant was that it was too dangerous for him yet. Won-T confirmed his words and said there was one way. Does he know that people display incredible strength at death's door? These words made Sunwoo nervous, and he thought, on the verge of death. Wanty said that an instant increase in strength in response to emergencies can tear muscles and break bones, but also, of course, affects the growth of characteristics. His body lit up with a blue aura, and he turned his head slightly in his direction, saying that it was the latter that he was missing right now. So far, he had won with his sense of battle, but during a rescue mission, even that wouldn't help him. Sunwoo sensed that something was going wrong and asked him to wait, but Wanty tightened his grip on the wooden sword hilt and said that he was sorry, but it was really the only way. He abruptly escorted him to his side and said that he could resist as much as he wanted. Sangwoo was very worried and, after a while, Sangwoo texted Junmo from phone number 2 and said it was him. Sangwoo, he's fine, so don't let him worry. He'll contact him later. He will also take a short break from hunting. Junmo replied that he understood. How does he feel? Sangwoo replied that he was still in the hospital, but there was no problem. After reading the message, Junmo became very nervous and started biting his nails. He was standing still and looking at his phone when Sunwoo's footsteps suddenly rang out in the office. He called out to him and he turned to him with a smile and asked, "Hunter Young Sangwoo." But he immediately stopped talking when he saw his battered appearance. One of Sunwoo's eyes was, and there was a huge bump on her cheek. Junmo's face immediately twisted in horror, and Sangwoo said it was him. This made Junmo's body tremble, and he stammered, "But why? How?" Sangwoo replied that a lot of things had happened. He has a lot to tell him. A few minutes passed. He told him everything. And then Junmo exclaimed in surprise, "Did his sister get Ma virus during the disaster? How's he doing? Is he alright?" Sangwoo confirmed his words and said that he had been told that the monostats were different even for family members. Junmo asked, so he also received a quest from the Canis Guild. Sangwoo confirmed his words and replied that it was because the guild master saved his family and him. Junmo said that he was worried that he couldn't contact him, but he didn't expect that to be the reason. Sunwoo lowered his gaze and said nothing, and after a short pause, he said that he had lost his phone, so he used the clone's phone, so let him change the contact number to his name. Junmo was slightly surprised and asked did he manage to back up his contacts yet. Sangwoo replied that he wasn't, and he wasn't going to do it. Junmo asked, "What does that mean? But isn't there some way to get the old numbers back? What about his friends and other important people?" Sangwoo thought of his friends and Hang, then frowned and closed his eyes, and saying that it was better this way. Junmo was surprised, so he decided not to bring it up again and asked, "What are his injuries?" Sangwoo replied that it was about the task he was talking about. The head told him that he needed to raise his stats, so they were going through training. At this news, Junmo jumped up from his chair and exclaimed, "What? But still, how could he bring it to this state? He will file a formal complaint against the guild." Sangwoo asked him to calm down and said that he agreed with this method. Chief Park Wanty's younger sister is locked in a dungeon, and he thinks his desperation is higher than anyone else's. And he understands that feeling. Junmo understood what he was talking about and called out to him in a low voice. Sunwoo abruptly extended his hand to the side, summoning a clone and saying that only he was beaten today, but he was going to create clones to attack with them. He handed his naked clone a bag of clothes and told him to put them on. Junmo sighed, unable to influence his decision in any way, and said that at least he would order healing potions. The next day came, and Sunwoo returned to the training hall. He slung the wooden sword over his shoulder with a smile and thanked Wanty for training, while number 1 went out and took out a knife. Wanty asked, so he took the clone with him. Sunwoo took a fighting stance and looked resolutely at his opponent, then abruptly rushed forward with his clone and said that it wouldn't be like yesterday. After training, they both came out beaten. And then the next day came. Sunwoo committed the training hall with number 1 and 2, and he said with a smile that there were 3 of them today. After the training session, all 3 of them came out again bruised, with fractures and abrasions. The next day came, number 1, 2, and 3 came forward, and Sangwoo hesitantly said that since there were 4 of them, it must be different, probably. After practice, all 4 of them left the gym, but this time it was number 3 who got the most. Sangwoo, while holding number 3, told the other clones to let them hold him tightly. As time passed, he and his clones returned to Junmo's office and sat down on the sofa. Junmo asked, "Are they okay?" Sangwoo replied that he was too strong. He raised a hand to his face thoughtfully and thought that since clones were good at copying movements, he wouldn't say that he wasn't learning anything, but they had a huge difference in stats. His clones started giving themselves first aid, and he thought he needed to figure out a way to close the gap. Suddenly, he came up with an idea and showed Junmo's phone and asked if it was possible. Junmo picked up the phone and looked at the screen, hesitantly replying that he might try to get this. But is it safe? Sangwoo replied that he didn't have to worry. He would be fine. As time passed, Sangwoo returned to the training hall again. Wanti heard the door open and Sangwoo called out to him. Wanti turned around and said that he was finally here. He's happy to see that he's working hard. He stopped in mid-sentence when he suddenly saw what was behind Sangwoo. His face took on a slightly surprised look, as there were now bone-gnawing monsters behind Sangwoo. Sangwoo smiled and said that today would definitely be different. Some time ago, Junmo, who was holding a huge box, turned to Sangwoo with a smile and said that he had received it. Sangwoo said that was what was expected of him. It worked so fast. Junmo put the box on the floor and said that he quickly bought it in just a day, so there's not much here. They both looked into the box, and he asked uncertainly, "Is this enough?" Sangwoo confirmed his words with a smile and said that he was sure the captain would be surprised as well. Currently, Wanti was looking in surprise at the clones that had taken on the appearance of monsters and asked what ulti. Sangwoo took out a red stone and said that he gave them something to eat. He put his hand on the head of the clone that was climbing up to devour the stone and said that he had given them 60 gems. After that, he gave the clone a stone to devour and said that since clones are considered summoned creatures, they can absorb them. The added characteristics also apply to it. Wanti was surprised by this and thought, can he use stones on clones? Sangwoo took out his sword and pistol and said with a determined look that he would go all out today. Wanti smiled and said that whether it was a sword or a gun, let him use whatever he wanted. Let him try to kill him. All the clones immediately rushed in his direction, ready to attack. As soon as number 1 approached and attacked, Wanti defended against it with a wooden sword. At the same time, number 2 appeared behind him, but he saw it just in time. He whirled around, blocking the blow, and thought that their abilities had definitely improved. It seems that the characteristics of clones are lower than those of the main body, but now the level is equal. He looked at the clone monster in front of Hyman, thought that it might be the effect of the stones, but it seems to him that the monster's effect is stronger. He abruptly raised his sword and then swung it, hitting the clone so hard that it was thrown to the side. After that, he turned to Sangwoo and said that it was good that they were getting stronger from the gems, but the clone's biggest advantage, their accuracy, was greatly reduced. It looks like they ate too many rocks. Sangwoo abruptly approached him and attacked, saying that at least he didn't turn into a monster. Wanti easily dodged the blow and replied that it was true. At the same time, Sangwoo pointed the muzzle of the gun directly at his head and pulled the trigger. A shot rang out, and the bullet went straight into Wanti's forehead, but it didn't wound him. The bullet melted as soon as it reached his face, and he said it was a good attack. He grabbed his arm and said that without a bullet loaded with mana, it wouldn't hurt him. After saying that, he pulled Sangwoo towards him and hit him in the stomach with a wooden sword, causing him to wheeze in pain. The clones at that moment decided to all attack one at once, but as soon as they approached, he easily repelled their attacks, and said that swinging his sword using only physical strength, his attacks would not become stronger. His weapon and body were covered with a blue aura, and he said that he should pour mana into his hands and sword, as if he was one with the sword and mana. If he succeeded in this technique, he would be able to cut through the monsters even with a branch. The clones froze in place when they saw that his wooden sword had broken their steel blades. And Sangwoo, lying on the floor, thought that he was mad. His wooden sword seemed stronger than a steel one. His eyes lit up, and he shouted that there was more to come. He abruptly got to his feet and attacked, swinging his sword from top to bottom, but Want blocked the blow and said that he definitely became stronger. Surprisingly, it has the ability to increase stats by absorbing rocks. He turned his gaze to the clones that had now decided to attack with their claws, and say that it was still not enough. He lunged forward, striking out at Sunwoo and all of his clones at once, and stopped in the center of the court. He turned his head towards Sangwoo and said that at this level, he could only perceive him as a C rank. Sunwoo's nose and lip bled from the blow, and he said that it might be true now, but things would change soon. As he said that, he quickly approached him and hit him, and Wanti blocked his sword. Sunwoo continued to press down on the sword with all his strength, while his clones were completely exhausted on the floor. Sunwoo gritted his teeth and looked directly into Wanti's eyes, as he said that he had no intention of stopping at C rank. After that, he turned to his clones and told them to peek here. They immediately raised their heads in his direction, and he told them to look at the captain's face. Wanty was taken aback, and Sang-woo exclaimed, "Where did they see that?" His angular nose, sharp chin. That's right, the captain is actually a rock. Wanty was very surprised, and in the eyes of the clones, he began to look like a red gemstone. Sang-woo said that whoever eats it first will win. The clones' bodies were immediately filled with energy, and they abruptly jumped to their feet. Sang-woo decided to attack again, and told the clones to let them all bite him. They all turned on the other party at once, and Sang-woo thought that, to be honest, he didn't decide to become stronger because of the other party's mission. One fended off the clone attacks, and Sang-woo thought that he just felt something when he opened his eyes in the hospital. He felt helpless that he had to entrust his family to someone else during the disaster. After clearing the monsters, a group of rescuers arrived at the destroyed part of the city and began searching under the rubble. One of them picked up a concrete slab and, seeing a dead firefly there, suddenly screamed and said that this monster had scared him. His partner asked him to calm down and said it was just a monster's corpse. Meanwhile, the guild leaders were sitting on the ground and resting. One of them looked at the huge monster, which had the same huge holes in it, and said that no matter how much they hit, it wouldn't budge. Shin Hae-sung stood on the roof of the building and also looked at the monster's corpse. He looked at the ruined city and grinned, not feeling the slightest bit of regret. Sang-woo continued his battle with Park Won-tae and thought that because he hated his weakness, because he was disheartened that the effort he put in didn't work out well, he didn't want to feel that way anymore. His clones were beaten up again, but he kept his feet steady and shouted, thinking that he shouldn't worry about his abilities right now. He leapt up and pounced on top of Wanty, bringing his sword up over him, then stamped, thinking that he hadn't planned on stopping. It's been 6 months. At night, military guards were stationed at the entrance to Sinseldon Station, where the hunting ground was located. Suddenly, one of the hunters hit another hunter, and from this blow he fell to the ground. His girlfriend immediately ran up to him and gently lifted his head, excitedly asking, "Is he okay?" He didn't say anything. At his head, excitedly asking, "Is he okay?" He didn't say anything, and then she turned to the man who had hit him and exclaimed, "Why are they doing this to them? They also have official permission to enter." The man told her to shut up. He smiled and asked, "Is it really that hard for them to understand that the Silver Moon Guild is currently hunting on this site? If they want to hunt, then let them choose another place." The guards became nervous, but continued to do nothing. The girl looked at them and thought that in this situation, they were pretending not to see anything. Suddenly, the man who had hit her friend took a closer look at her. He called out to her and told her to stay, and they would take her to the hunting ground. Someone else in the guild said that their team leader was a great guy. The hunter helped his friend up, and, hearing these words, said that he was garbage. Suddenly, the team leader laughed and told the others to shut up. They were scaring them. He suggested that they go to the hunting ground, but suddenly another person began to approach the entrance to the station. The man turned his head in annoyance at the sound of footsteps. The guard began to detain this hooded hunter and nervously asked him to look carefully. "Doesn't he see the situation?" The hunter asked. "What is it?" He paid for the entrance fee. Suddenly, a man came up to him and exclaimed, "Is he stupid or something?" The hunter looked at the huge man in front of him, and he flexed his fists and immediately pounced on him, exclaiming that this was the Silver Moon Guild's hunting ground. As soon as his fist came close to the hunter's face, he blocked the blow, and then with his other hand hit the man in the stomach, which threw him up. Drool flew out of the man's mouth. He wheezed in pain, and the other hunters, who were affected by him, looked in their direction in surprise. The unknown hunter looked at his fist and asked, how else was he supposed to react to the sudden impact? He was surprised and acted on reflex. He raised a hand to his chin thoughtfully and asked, "Silver Moon, I think he's heard of them somewhere." He took off his hood and said something didn't add up. The man whimpered in pain and was about to hit him. But Sang-woo, who was hiding his face under the hood, prevented it and asked what his entrance to the hunting ground had to do with the presence of another guild here. This guy's mouth started drooling, and he looked up at Woo and said that he was a jerk. The other members of the Silver Moon Guild immediately went to their comrade's defense and exclaimed, "He dares to attack the Silver Moon Guild." They surrounded him on all sides and drew their weapons, telling him not to think that he would get away with it. One of them said that they were all D-class hunters. Does he think he can handle all of them alone? Sun Woo repeated, "Alone." He stamped his foot, and at the same time, His clone appeared next to the military man. The rest of the clones appeared next to the victims and began to slowly approach the enemies. One of the guild members noticed them and told the senior that they were over there. The man turned around and exclaimed, "What the hell? Who else is there?" Sunwoo, who had already surrounded the opponents with his clones, asked if he could do it again. Who did he tell there that he was alone? Meanwhile, in the office, Junmo heard the sound of the door opening and immediately turned his gaze to the side and saw Park 1T standing in front of him. 1T greeted him with a smile and apologized for coming so late. Yumho smiled at him and told him that if he didn't have to apologize, then he should have come to him. 1T disagreed and said that the person who needs it should come. He would like to consider it. 1T knew what he was talking about and didn't finish listening, immediately opening the drawer and saying that he was going to get it out. He handed him some documents and told him that this was what he asked for since this is personal information. They cannot take photos of it and must return it to them. After viewing it, 1T replied that of course it was true, he just needed to check something. He picked up the papers and began to read intently. After that, he asked, he had raised his stats so much in just 6 months, right? Junmo smiled and confirmed his words, saying that he now has the impression that he is a completely different person. He thought that after that incident, he had become obsessed with hunting and exercising. He asked if these characteristics would be enough to fulfill the plan. 1T replied that there was nothing to talk about. In fact, he had a backup option in case he didn't make it, but he might not care. He looked at Sunwoo's stats and thought that his growth rate was simply monstrous. After reviewing all the skills, he said that they would start a mission to rescue T. He raised his hand to his chin and thought that he had already surpassed the D-class level and almost reached C-class. One day, he might even become a high-ranked hunter. Cloning really makes the user stronger, which shows their characteristics. He wonders how strong he is right now. Sunwoo, meanwhile, was fighting with the members of the Silver Moon Guild. The military stood off to the side and did nothing, just watching them. Number 1 punched the man in the face, causing blood to spray out of his nose and mouth. And the injured guy, who was standing to the side, asked what they were looking at right now. Number 2 threw another kick, causing the man to fall to the ground, and then grabbed his clothes and was about to hit him again. But the soldier asked him to stop right away. Sangwoo turned to him and asked, "Stop what?" The military man said it was too much. They can't do that. Sangwoo was silent for a few seconds and then said that he should have said so when those hunters were beaten up, and not now. But they didn't do anything, even after they took out their weapons. The guys who had suffered at the hands of the Silver Moon Guild members remained silent. Sangwoo told the military that he wasn't going to blame them, but they could just continue to guard the entrance like they did before. The soldiers suddenly trembled with fear and couldn't find the words to reply. After that, Sunwoo broke the phone of one of the guild members and told his clones to do the same so that they wouldn't be able to contact the others. At his command, the clones simultaneously smashed their phones with their bare hands. The victims, meanwhile, were impressed after such a spectacle, and one of them suggested that the others go somewhere else. They agreed and then left. Meanwhile, at Sinselden Station, vile monsters were raging inside the hunting grounds, but some of them were already dead. The hunters inside were collecting gems that had fallen from the dead monsters, and flinching at every rustle. There was a man among them. He picked up another stone and, hearing sounds in the distance, suddenly froze in place, and then squeezed the stone and threw it away, shouting that he could not do this anymore. He gritted his teeth and caught his breath, exclaiming, "Why does he have to do this?" Suddenly he heard footsteps coming from the side and immediately jumped up, thinking that it was from the entrance. They're conducting an inspection. Someone's shoes appeared on the stairs, and the man, not even knowing who it was, smiled awkwardly and said that they were already here. He still needs some time to collect his share. He laughed awkwardly, and Sangwoo asked who he was. The man was surprised at first and began to look closely at Sangwoo, saying that he remembered him. He's the horned rabbit hunter. He called him uncle and said they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The man remembered who he was and exclaimed, "Why is he here behind him?" He saw 3 other people walking behind Sangwoo, and he asked one of them, "Are you sure they've taken care of everything?" The man shouted again in surprise, "How did he get here?" He's sure that the Silver Moon Guild was protecting the entrance. Sunwoo and his clones came down to him and told him that it was he who was going to ask. They're weak, and this is a D-class dungeon. So what are they doing here? After hearing the words that he was weak, the man started to mentally insult him. And after that, Sangwoo left his gaze and said that judging by his appearance, he wasn't here for hunting. He shifted his gaze to the side and saw another man collecting crystals and secretly observing them. After that, he said that it looked like the Silver Moon Guild had locked them up here. To confirm his words, the man shuddered in fear. And after that, Sangwoo took out his phone and said that he didn't feel sorry, but he needed to hear what happened here. He showed him a picture of the Silver Moon Guild members kneeling naked and told him not to worry about those assholes at the entrance. The man was very surprised by this and asked, "What the hell? These are D-class hunters." Sangwoo's patience was almost exhausted and he clenched his trembling hand into a fist, telling him to shut up and start talking, or does he want to end up like them? The man squeezed his eyes shut, choosing his words, and then decided to tell him everything. A new monster's corpse appeared at the station and Sangwoo and the man sat on the floor. The man showed him the precious crystal and said that he probably knows that D-class monsters leave crystals after death, but not always. Sunwoo replied that he didn't know that they only appear in D-class monsters and above. The man said that these crystals remain in the body of monsters for a long time, even after their death. And in the dungeon, the monsters themselves are constantly fighting among themselves. A diagram suddenly appeared in Sam's mind. Monsters fight each other, then crystals drop, a new battle begins, and then more crystals appear. Sangwoo said that he understood, so there are crystals piling up in the dungeon. The man put the crystal in a bag and said that it was true, but D-class hunters didn't want to bother with them. So they collect low-class hunters, lock them in a dungeon, and don't let them out until they've collected enough crystals. Sunwoo looked at the other hunters who were collecting crystals and asked, "How did these people end up here?" The man replied that someone had a debt to the guild and someone was sold to the guild by other people. Most are debtors or newcomers. Sangwoo said that in this case, it's dangerous. What if they run into a monster? He replied that even if someone died while collecting the crystal, no one would be surprised if the hunters died in the dungeon, as it was a natural outcome. Sunwoo looked at the hunters again and said nothing, imagining in his mind the endless collection of items in the game, like the lower-class hunters did to keep them locked up here. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and thought that he would never have thought that he would find something like this in reality. He told the man to let him go. He looked at it in surprise and decided to ask, "What does this mean?" Sangwoo said to let him go before he changed his mind. The Silver Moon Guild won't stop him. Dumbfounded, the man got to his feet and began to cry, covering his mouth with his hand and thinking that this jerk was actually a good guy. As he was leaving, Sangwoo grabbed the bag and told him to leave the crystals behind. The man turned around and looked at him quizzically, and Sangwoo laughed and asked, "What is it?" Not that they were on good terms. The man handed him the bag and went upstairs to the exit of the station, muttering insults under his breath. Sangwoo, meanwhile, looked at the contents of the bag and smiled, saying that he had collected a lot. He tossed bag number 1 and said let him eat it all. Number 1 stuffed several crystals into his mouth at once and started chewing on them. And Sangwoo looked into the distance and said, "Collecting crystals, he will accept it gratefully." Time passed, and somewhere in the station I could hear the quick footsteps of a hunter running. She ran forward with all her might and cursed, realizing the danger of the situation. Behind them, a monster was running, snarling and drooling from its mouth. It was a C-class monster, an abomination. The girl was running away from it and shouting that they didn't say anything about what a C-class monster might look like. She gritted her teeth and shouted that they were assholes. This girl was one of the workers of the Silver Moon Guild. Her name is Kim Un-young. She continued to run, but suddenly the monster decided to use a weapon and swung, immediately striking. Un reacted quickly and managed to duck. She increased her speed again, but suddenly tripped and fell face first, crying out in pain. The monster had already caught up with her and closed in again to strike, and Un covered her face with her hands in an attempt to defend herself. She squeezed her eyes shut and prepared for the worst, thinking that she didn't want to die in such a place. But suddenly, Sangwoo grabbed her by the collar and asked for her forgiveness, right after saying that he yanked Un-young to the side, thus saving her from being hit. Dust rose from the monster's impact, and Un cleared her throat, asking who it was. Sangwoo smiled slightly and replied that he was her savior. "By the way, does she have any crystals? Didn't she collect them?" Un replied that she had thrown them out a long time ago. After a bad hit, the monster decided to attack again and Sangwoo asked, did she throw them out? He'd heard her say something about the Hisong Guild. Isn't she here from the Silver Moon Guild? The monster, meanwhile, approached him again and was about to attack. And NN, noticing this, told Sanwoo to look ahead. One in the form of a monster that had already devoured all the crystals rushed to attack and hit the monster. Sangwoo calmly said that the others said that they were here from the Silver Moon Guild. Anen ignored him and looked in surprise at the second red monster ahead, exclaiming, "What is it?" Number 1 continued the fight, grinning and throwing more punches. Sangwoo noticed that she was distracted and called out to her. Young paid attention to Sangwoo, and he sighed and said that he had asked a question. What's up with the Heesong Guild? While things were going on around her, it was unclear that Sangwoo remained calm, and Anen was alerted by this. She wondered who this guy was. She decided to run away and immediately took off, running past Sangwoo. Noticing this, he grabbed her by the collar and told her that she wouldn't leave. Anen felt a strong grip on her body and held on to her clothes. More monsters started coming at them from all directions, and Sangwoo, still holding on to Anen's clothes, told her not to run away. In response, she exclaimed, "How can he behave like this when surrounded by monsters?" Sangwoo replied that he should just forget about them. Right after saying that, the other two clones also came to the rescue and killed the two monsters. Anen was surprised by this and thought, are they a teen, or is he a summoner? Who are they anyway? Sunwoo said it was safe here. She sees it, doesn't she? A moment later, there was an explosion behind H. A huge abomination knocked number 1 to the ground, grabbing him by the throat, while the rest of the clones attacked him from behind. Sunwoo turned around at the explosion and asked, "Did he lose?" Anen exclaimed with displeasure that of course it was safe here. Sunwoo looked at number 1, who had fallen to the ground and was coughing up blood, and asked how could he lose after eating so many crystals. The huge monster growled again, preparing to attack, and Anen thought she should run. Sangwoo suddenly said to let her wait here. Anen was worried, and Sangwoo went to the monster and said that he had wasted so many expensive crystals. Young called out to him, but immediately fell silent when Sangwoo told her to be quiet. He took out his blade and slowly walked towards the monster, saying that he needed to focus. Suddenly, the monster coughed up blood and started waving its arms, while Sangwoo rushed forward to attack. As soon as he got close to the monster, he plunged the sword into its arm and twisted the blade, cutting off part of its body. The monster screamed loudly in pain, and Anen stood still and continued to watch. Sangwoo gritted his teeth, and as he went on the attack again, he thought that he needed to be as fast as possible. As he approached the monster again, he began to deal numerous blows to the monster's arms and legs, sparing no effort. Anen was surprised by his strength and thought that this guy was quite strong. As Sangwoo struck, the distance between the monsters increased, and he once again rushed forward to attack. He came face to face with the monster, and suddenly his eyes turned sharply red under the impact of the sword. Instead of an abomination, he saw the huge firefly that had nearly killed his family that fateful day. Seeing the illusion in front of him, he closed his eyes and thought that he needed to calm down. He gritted his teeth and cursed as a red light started to radiate from his eyes. Anen noticed that he was in danger and shouted at him to be careful. At the same time, a huge abomination swooped down on the monster from Sunwoo, all directions, and started throwing punches. Sunwoo had already recovered and looked up at the monster while swinging his sword. In the next instant, he swung the blade down sharply, cutting the monster's body in half. Black blood spurted out from the wound, but the monster was still standing on its feet. Seeing the monster's body finally disconnect, Sangwoo sighed. The two halves of the monster's body in front of him began to slide down slowly with a slimy sound, then plummeted. Sunwoo shoved the sword back into its scabbard and said that every time he used it, it gave him a disgusting feeling. He turned around and stopped when he saw a surprised Anen, who said that he had overcome the abomination. Sunwoo asked, "Is she still here?" Anen responded by saying that he had told her to wait. Sangwoo replied that he only hoped that she would listen, but he didn't expect anything like that. He looked at number 1, who was lying next to him, writhing in pain. He sat down and asked if he was okay. Number 1 continued to sigh heavily and didn't respond. Sunwoo then looked at the wound on his shoulder and said that it was strange. He should have recovered by now. Anen said that the abomination bone sword is cursed and has a corruption spell on it. If they didn't get tough healer, it would be bad. She asked if it was true. It would have been bad for him if the sword of abomination had hit him. He frowned and thought that this was some kind of bad luck. When they eat a lot of crystals, they only hit without dodging. Anin looked at number 1 and asked, "Is he really human?" She thought it was a troll in a cap. Sunwoo replied that she might think he was a summoner. Anin said nothing and looked back at the monster that was writhing in pain. After some thought, she made a decision and test, scratching her head. She took out a bottle with some green liquid inside and handed it to Sunwoo, saying that if he drank it, he would live a little longer. But don't let him blame her for the consequences. Sunwoo saw a bottle of small skulls floating in front of him and asked suspiciously, "What is it?" Anin replied that they were medicines. Sangwoo thought that there were also skulls there. Even so, he still decided to take it and started pouring the contents into number 1's mouth, thinking that it wasn't like he had a choice. As soon as number 1 swallowed the green slime, he began to emit fumes and Anin quickly covered her airway with her hand. The wounds on number 1's shoulder and side began to heal quickly as the medicine got inside. Sangwoo thought that it had an amazing effect. "What is this medicine?" As soon as the treatment was over, number 1 quickly stood up with a straight face and Sangwoo sighed. He happily turned to Anin and said it was great, he was fine now. Anin replied that it was for the time being. Sunwoo asked blankly, "What does that mean?" Anin pulled the cap down over her face and replied that the medicine had a side effect, so his life energy will be exhausted. Her skill is poison. Her active 5th level poison skill allows her to create items that contain poison. The number of recipes increases as the skill level increases and the quality of each individual poison can be increased. She can also create a low-grade regen. Sunwoo asked, "So he's going to die as soon as his life force drops to 0? Anin replied that he would have died anyway, so she thought it would be better than nothing. The news made number 1 nervous. Sangwoo pointed his finger to the side and said that she also said that he was going to die soon, so let him start hunting. Number 1 quickly sprinted to the side, and Sangwoo thought that he would still have to summon a Tagan. Young looked down at Sangwoo and said that she had already told him what her skill was, so now it was his turn. Sunwoo didn't say anything, and Anin asked who he was. He has spits in the form of monsters that are terribly strong in their own right, and he killed the abomination. She had never heard of someone so strong among the B-class hunters in their country. Sangwoo looked away from her and said that of course she hadn't heard of such things. He's also an E-class, and 6 months ago, it was generally F-class. Anin raised her hand to her chin thoughtfully and asked, "E-class?" She suddenly realized what he had just said and exclaimed in surprise. E-class. She became very nervous and asked, "What is a hunter of his class doing in a D-class dungeon? Although, no, how is it possible for him to hunt so easily here?" Sangwoo asked her to calm down and said that he also had some questions for her. Anin became agitated and asked which ones. Sangwoo smiled at her and asked why she was talking to him like they were friends. Anin was taken aback by his question and only asked what. Meanwhile, boxes were being moved to the Yellow Guild vault. Ho, the head of this guild, looked at them nervously and then asked, "Is that enough?" Her guild manager Kim Soon looked at the boxes and asked why she suddenly decided to collect them. She hadn't done that before. Ho replied that it was Mr. Wanti's request. He also said that he would pay a large sum for it. Sona looked into the boxes and asked why he needed so much. Does he have so many pets? There was a pile of boxes of red precious crystals in front of them, and Ho said that she thought his name was Young Sangwoo. She had heard that he was the one who used these crystals. Meanwhile, Eun-young stared at Sangwoo in confusion and wondered if this idiot was being bullied for something like this. What should she do? If he's a bad person, can he? No, she wouldn't show her weaknesses until the very end. She asked, "So what? He can also talk as if they've known each other for a long time." Sangwoo looked up at her and asked with a stupid face, "Really? Can I do that?" Anin was slightly pleased by his reaction and thought that it looked like he was just an idiot. He got to his feet and said that wasn't what he was really interested in. After all, why did she mention the Hisong Guild when she was running away? That's what he wanted to know. Anin was surprised by his question and asked, "He's a hunter, right, and he doesn't know about it?" Sunwoo scratched his head awkwardly and replied that he had recently obtained a hunter's license, so he didn't know much about the relationship between guilds. She asked if he had just recently received his license. The Silver Moon Guild is subordinate to the Hisong Guild. They pretend otherwise, but in fact do all the dirty work for them. She's pretty sure most of the people here were caught by the Hisong Guild. He said he understood. So who caught her? Anin opened her mouth to say something, but suddenly her heart skipped a beat, She remembered how small she was and looked into the room where she found the hanged man. With a scary face, she told Sangwoo that he didn't need to know. Sunwoo didn't say anything as he looked at her reaction, and after that, she held her head and thought that she was crazy. She even told him about her skill. Sunwoo became nervous and asked why she was suddenly angry. He sighed and turned away from her, saying that in any case, he got the information he wanted, so he leaves. Anin exclaimed. Has he finished yet? Sunwoo asked what she was talking about. He's just getting started. She can go out. No one is guarding the entrance. The Silver Moon assholes also left. Anin turned towards the exit and adjusted her cap, thanking him. They started to go off in opposite directions. But suddenly Sangwoo stopped and said that he thought her skill was really amazing. Anin turned around in surprise, then walked over and asked, "What's her skill? Is he kidding me? He would die if he drank her poison." Sunwoo took out a business card and said that as she saw for herself, he didn't care about the side effects. He handed her a blood-stained business card with Kong Yeon-mo's contacts, and she thought that this business card was so dirty. He said that if she needed help finding a job, or if she was afraid of revenge from the Heesung Guild, then let her contact this number, where he is a member, as well as his agent. They really hate this guild. And now he really should go. He called out to number 6 and told her to walk her out. As time passed, Sangwoo cut down a few monsters in his path and stopped, thinking that her skill would be useful for his clones. Should he have pushed her harder? Suddenly, there was a crash behind him, and he turned to see that the monster had been thrown against the wall, followed by a crazed number 1. His mouth was drooling, he was breathing heavily, and at one point he coughed up blood. After that, he immediately collapsed on the floor, and Sangwoo called out to him in concern. He thought it must be a side effect. He thought that with his regeneration, he would be able to overcome this. Body number 1 was missing, only his belongings were still there, and Sangwoo said that he did a great job. After that, he once again summoned the number 1 that appeared at the station, flashing his naked body. Sangwoo pointed at the clothes and said that he should wear them again. Number 1 agreed and began to dress. V adjusted the mask on his face, and Sangwoo said that they would continue hunting. They continued on through the station, and behind them, they could see the human silhouettes watching them from their hiding places. A beaten Silver Moon Guild member followed Sangwoo, and his friend asked, "Did he leave?" The guy confirmed his words, and the man asked what it was. He thought he was human, but it's a monster. The guy said he thought he was dead, but the same one came back to life. He wonders what kind of skill he has, and judging by the conversations, there are several more of the same. Are they in danger? The man swore and said that if they had at least uniforms, they would at least be able to do something. The guy said they were beaten up, even when they were armed. By the way, why did they come back? Everyone who collected the crystals had already run away. The man went to the wall and started banging on it, saying that he was a jerk. Doesn't he know what this place is? The reason why they restricted this area for hunting is here. He found a cavity in the wall and, while removing part of the wall to the side, said that fortunately, he didn't seem to find this place. His friend exclaimed, "Is there a hidden room?" They went inside and saw that various equipment was placed everywhere, and the guy said that it looked like production equipment. Why build such a room here? The man moved part of the wall to the side, closed the passage behind them, and said that because you can supply material directly from the territory for hunting. And how big is the chance that someone will find this room? No one would even think of exploring the hunting area for such facilities. The guy looked at the crystals that were spread around the room and asked, "Do they also deal with illegal substances?" The man called him a jerk and said he misunderstood. He opened the cabinet, his face lit up with a red glow, and said that it was much more expensive. He showed his friend bags of crushed crystals and said that they were concentrated refined crystals. He took a small crystal and held it up to his face, saying that their capabilities were 100 times higher than normal crystals. Only one such stone raises the characteristics by 0.5. However, the side effect of becoming a monster is also more significant and higher, which turns even the most beautiful pet into an uncontrolled creature. Because of this, sales of these crystals are prohibited. The guy said he didn't think it was worth it because of the side effect. What's the use of high stats if they become monsters? The man tossed the crystal back into the bag and replied that he was right. Not many people are willing to take the risk. But recently, they heard a story that changes everything. This is Deb. They have heard that there is a place where they produce a product that can be used on humans. Because of the name of the project, the main company buys crystals like crazy. But since it is illegal to create them, The prices are also sky high. He shifted his gaze to his buddy and asked who would have thought that this trash could be exchanged for money, so they will be able to earn millions. He closed the closet and said they might get a little roughed up and scolded for losing a couple of kids, but that was different. They'll just leave it here and come back tomorrow, the guy said. They won't take it now. They left the room and the man, putting a piece of wall back in place, asked, and if they get caught, can he stop those assholes? Did he even think about it? They won't be able to hide an ounce of it, because they're in their underwear right now. The guy apologized for the stupid question, and then the wall fell into place, and they left. After a while, footsteps rang out. Anin pushed aside a piece of wall and peered inside, taking a closer look at the contents of the room. Suddenly, she smiled and thought that she had found it. She gritted her teeth as she looked to the sides and thought that it was difficult for her to get rid of tea. He replied that he had already been told to accompany me to the entrance. His mind was all mixed up, and he froze in place, saying that this wasn't the entrance. He needed to escort her. Then she said he was so stubborn. As she recalled this, she looked around the room and thought that the right decision was to stay in this area for hunting. Those idiots from North Moon had brought her here quite well, but she can't understand why they were in their underwear. She went to the cabinet and abruptly opened it, happily saying that it was here. She looked down at the bags and said they were precious crystals. She began to put the bags under her clothes and thought that there were a lot of them. After that, she left the room and, as she put the piece of wall back in place, thought that they looked weighty. Wouldn't it seem strange? Suddenly, someone ran to the side. It turned out to be the other employees who were running to the exit according to the instructions of number 5. He pointed them in the direction with his finger, and they thanked him with tears in their eyes. Anin was happy to see the other people and thought that she could join them and escape. She joined the crowd, and number 6 finally saw her among the other people. All this time, he was very tense, but when he saw her, he remembered his task, and an algorithm appeared in his head. He needs to escort her to the entrance. Now they are both at the entrance, and she has arrived safely, which means the escort mission is completed. When he realized this, he smiled broadly and was delighted. While Anin ran out of the station with the others and thought that she was safe, she ran away. She continued on her way and laughed in her head, telling the Silver Moon Guild, and he sung to go to hell. Sangwoo, meanwhile, slung the sword over his shoulder and sighed, saying that he thought the people were safe now. They had dealt with the monsters. He happily picked up the bag of crystals and said that they also had crystals. He slung the bag over his shoulder and said that he was wondering why there were so few crystals on the market today. What a great catch! This is number 1 patted his stomach and asked if he should eat it all. Sangwoo replied that if he became a monster now, it would only frighten people. The cloning skill hasn't recovered yet, so let it wait until tomorrow. As he was heading for the exit, the phone in his pocket vibrated, and he took it out to check the notifications. He received a message from Kong Junmo asking him to come to the Canis Guild tomorrow. They said they wanted to explain the details of the assignment to him. After reading the message, he said that the time had finally come. When the next day came, the members of the Silver Moon Guild returned to the secret room and did not find the crystals. The man's face darkened and he exclaimed, "Where did they go? They were here yesterday." The guy excitedly asked what to do now. The payment deadline is tomorrow. The man was very angry and the veins on his face bulged. They left the station, and the first thing he did was grab the soldier by the throat, squeeze him with all his strength. The soldier asked what he was doing. The man called him a jerk and said that if he was paid, then let him do his job normally. Who did he let in here? The soldier's mouth was already drooling, and he said that they only agreed that he would let them pass. If other hunters purchase a ticket, they do not have the right to refuse them entry. The only one who entered is the person who beat them up. Hearing about Sangwoo, the man suddenly shuddered and even said that the people who entered were people they had locked inside the dungeon themselves. The man became nervous and wondered what it meant. Only these people were inside and went oh. The military man said he wasn't lying. He could ask the other guards. After that, he released him and he started coughing, bringing his breathing back to normal. The man remembered the clone's goofy face and wondered why it had to be them. His whole body trembled with fear, and he thought that he was finished. How can he recover the crystals from the clutches of these monsters? Some time ago, Anin continued on her way and thought that she didn't expect them to shove them into a dungeon meant for C-class hunters. If it hadn't been for that weirdo, she might not have come out alive. She looked at the bag that was completely filled with crystals and said that at least she had earned something.